Trying to get more money for us.
I'm actually going out to next week's schedule. There's a plan yet, so I don't wish that she does. But yeah, something will be very happy. It won't be me, hopefully, but
Make sure you lock that in. I had to do this at an internship. I was doing every morning, few wheels or whatever else work I had there. But like my busy work, I had to do to HBCU, super high.
No, Sarah.
I was like, this is like,
yeah.
you should get one right in the
So nice. No, here's the way it's something like
It's like, I'm a double for sure.
yeah, then I'm gonna come to you. There's some meet, I'm gonna write it down. Like, we'll let him have a few years. The whole thing is just getting in that habit, you know, I've always thought that $20.
I worked in calls every year, call and ask.
Oh, did you?
I did that for a while. And, I got to see how it looks. You know, you're 5 out of 10
People just have the misperception that we're state funded, that we don't need it, you know, it's hard to show them. And that legal education is expensive now, so all these skill things, you have to train first. Of course. Yeah, so it's usually.
Gotta get after our state all too. You ready? I'm gonna just like, yeah. You seem ready.
I mean, the first one you have.
The reason I'm yeah, my friend. She's wild, right? She's right. Do I have any space for what? I'm gonna use it for questions, but not for Sure. Did they tell you that?
No.
So you was telling us before, make sure that the back is lined up with these. That way, yeah, there's 2 blocks there. That way, it's like it's just how the cameras work. Oh wait, so if you're gonna open it, then you're gonna need to face the chair.
Yeah, so that's always thinking.
Yeah, that's her question. Is that good? One question real quick. She wants to use the podium for opening. How should she have the podium?
I mean,
But she's facing the chair.
yeah, right.
So so that line is where it's when you're talking with your
So I need to.
So
Just don't block it. Don't block. That's why those are here. Don't go further than that. This is where. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
just move it down.
Where is the time indicator going to be to show the time remaining?
Sarah, I will have it, and then we will also,
You have that computer there.
yeah, and I'll also post in the chat how much time you have remaining and like basic updates. Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and just.
Okay, Sorry, I'm gonna have my back to y'all because that's the camera that's on YouTube. But thank you guys for joining us today for the IPE Board Fall 2020 mock trial. I'm gonna introduce first the School of Law's Dean Susan Duncan. She's gonna say some welcoming things first.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I'm so excited to see this happen. I think it's probably our third year doing this, so it's wonderful to have all the pharmacy students back. And
That top left camera is where you can see it.
Okay.
There you go.
sorry,
you're
I'm back to you. But I'm really excited that it's our third year. This has been a great collaboration with the pharmacy students. I know our law students really value it. And a special thanks to Dean Allen. He has been wonderful to work with. I'm starting my fourth year, and he is responsible for me being here. He was the chair of my search committee. He's a fantastic dean. The pharmacy students are so lucky to have him. So a special thanks to him and to our faculty advisor, Larry Pittman. This was just an idea that I brought to him, and he has been wonderful and has taken it to the next level. So thank you, Professor Pittman. You all are in a beautiful building on campus. I hope you get time to walk around just a little bit to see it, the people who are here. We are the fourth oldest law school in the nation, founded in 1854. So there's a lot of history with this law school. And one of the things we're really proud about is how well we do in oral advocacy competitions. So we've won lots of national championships, international championships over the years. So you all are going to see some really good trial attorneys today. Unfortunately, I have another university meeting, so I'm not going to be able to join you, but I'll try to watch it later because I really would love to see the skill. But thank you very much, and good luck to both teams.
Thank you.
So now the pharmacy school Dean Allen is just going to have a few welcoming statements as well.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to be with you all today. I want to extend my great thanks to Dean Duncan. She is phenomenal and sets the standard on our campus. So I really am honored to work with her. She's done a great job. I appreciate her kind words. But it was easy to recruit someone of her talent and her stature to our school, and she's done amazing things already, and I'm really pleased to be able to work with her. So I want to thank everyone for participating in this interprofessional event between law and pharmacy today. Just a fantastic opportunity for us to come together to learn with, from, and about one another. And so it's just a fantastic situation for us. The third year, very exciting that we're continuing this. I also want to extend my gratitude to Professor Larry Pittman and Dr. Kim Adcock for their work in this process, as well as Judge Tolson for participating as well. I appreciate Gray's time and him being with us today. So I wish I could be there to greet him personally, because I've always enjoyed my interactions with him, especially in Jackson when he was serving our state there. I'd like to thank the Interprofessional Education Student Board, as well as everyone that's participating today. It's going to be a great time, a great experience for this fantastic partnership. The IPE Student Board is the first student-led interprofessional board of law and pharmacy students in the United States. And I think that speaks incredibly well to our programs and to our students and their commitment to interprofessionalism and to really elevating our professions, learning from one another so that we can do that. It demonstrates our commitment to continuously improve the services that we offer to our patients and to our clients, and anything that we can do to enhance those skills and abilities and the impact that we can have on the lives of those individuals is incredibly important as well. Law is an extremely important and integral part of the pharmacy profession. I hope that as a result of this event, that you'll learn more about how pharmacy and how law can coexist, that you'll gain a sense of what you can accomplish when we work together, and that you can see the value of seeking expertise beyond your own circle, beyond your own profession. And this is a great example of that, and pharmacy and law can certainly learn from, with, and about one another. So both our professions of pharmacy and law are constantly evolving, constantly changing. So I'd like to commend you all for dedicating your time and your effort to working together to benefit our profession. So I wish you a great day. Like Dean Duncan, I've got other university meetings I've got to attend, and I also look forward to being able to watch this later. But I know this is going to be a fantastic event, and it's a pleasure and an honor for me to be able to be with you all today. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you this morning.
Okay, I believe that the videos are fixed on YouTube now, so I can get you all. So thank you guys again for being here. For those on YouTube and on Zoom who don't know what the IPE board does, it is essentially a board that currently has the pharmacy school and the law school that collaborate, and we do social action things in the spring, and we do this mock trial in the fall. So the IPE board creates this case over the summer, and then the competitors here today and some others compete throughout the semester by drafting complaints, answers, expert reports, and then they do preliminary rounds of the mock trial to come to be a finalist today. So before today, congratulations again on becoming finalists. Just some housekeeping things to go over for those on Zoom. Please remain muted and turn your video off. Also, you might want to change your screen to speaker view so that you can see all 3 cameras in the courtroom and our 4th advocate, Sarah Schneidman, who's on Zoom today. When the trial concludes, Judge Tollison will read to you the jury instructions. You'll then be placed in your breakout rooms. And then after you're placed in your breakout rooms, you may step away from your computer for half an hour for lunch, and then you will come back. Oh. Did it mess up again? Sorry.
The back door is on, so it's this one.
Then he fixed it. Whatever, I'm gonna keep going. Sorry if you cannot see me, but we're trying to get YouTube fixed, but Zoom people can see me, and that's what really matters. So as I was saying, you'll be placed in breakout rooms, then you may step away from your computer for half an hour, eat lunch, and then come back. You will turn your cameras on, and then you will deliberate with your jury groups as to a verdict. We've already pre-assigned jury foremen, so they will take lead with the conversation. So just wait for them to start, and they'll guide you through the conversation. Additionally, there will be an evidence link I'll drop in the chat for Zoom today. When the advocates present evidence or admit evidence, it will be dropped into that link where you can have access to it. You can also use this during your jury deliberations. And then Casey has some stuff with pharmacy students.
Okay, so I'm going to be dropping Google Forms throughout this at random times to fulfill your participation requirements for the pharmacy students, law students. You can answer them if you want to, but you're not required, just if you want to do it for funsies and everything. But just make sure you're paying attention to those because there is a time limit.
I think that's all of our housekeeping things. We'll get YouTube fixed if it's not fixed right now. I think that's it for now. Thank you. Oh yay. All persons having business before the Circuit Court for Lafayette County of the United States are admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting. God save the United States in this honorable court. All right.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. We'll call up the case of Robert Goldblum, plaintiff, versus Art X to me, Inc., the defendant. It's a civil action number CV-20-900-543 in the Circuit Court of Lafayette County, Mississippi. What says the plaintiff?
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Matthew Dellinger, along with my co-counsel who's appearing today via Zoom, Sarah Schneidman. We have the privilege and honor of representing Mr. Goldblum in today's case. We have a few housekeeping matters and motions in limine, but before we get to that, I would like for defense counsel to be allowed to make appearances.
What says the defendant?
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Harley David, and I, along with my co-counsel, Kaylin Tsai, represent the defendants in this case, RX2Me Incorporation.
All right. Do we need to invoke the rule today?
Yes, Your Honor. So that's one of our housekeeping matters. Would you like to constructively invoke the rule?
Yes, we need to invoke the rule. Any witnesses that we need to have sequestered, we can have, I guess, is there a witness room here?
We ask that this rule be allowed to be constructively, constructively sequestered, other than our party representative, Mr. Goldblum.
Gotcha. All right. So that'll be ordered.
Other than that, Your Honor, do you need a clean copy of the record? We have one prepared for you if you need.
I think I have one up here.
Yes, Your Honor. Anticipating that over the course of today's trial, there will be objections We asked that instead of allowing them to be at sidebar, we have them in the open well. That way they can be scored.
That's acceptable under the circumstances.
Thank you, Your Honor. May we have permission to use demonstrative aids? I know that the plaintiffs have one demonstrative aid. We have told the defense about it. It's the pill bottle. It's a pill bottle. It's not the pill bottle of today's case. It's used during opening statements just as a demonstrative of a pill bottle, and that will be made clear to the jury.
What's the defendant's response to that? Feel bottle?
We have no objection, Your Honor.
Yeah, that'll be allowed.
May we move freely about the well? May we move freely about the well?
Yeah, that'll be fine. You'll be here at the podium questioning the witnesses.
Yes, Your Honor. And noting that there is no court reporter in today's trial, where would you like evidence to be placed after it's tendered to the bench?
Y'all have a suggestion? We have an empty witness box.
Yeah, so the witnesses I think will be on that side, so maybe on that side?
Why don't you do it here on your right, so there's no empty witness box.
Yes, Your Honor. We took care of the rule, and last but not least, would you like us to verbally tender expert witnesses, or would you like us to simply lay the foundation and move on into questioning and conclusions?
I'd like you to tender with the expert.
Yes, Your Honor.
Have y'all pre-marked your exhibits? Have y'all already done that, or y'all just offering as?
They are not marked. I will be referring to them as plaintiffs 1, 2, 3, and so on, and then offering them the evidence as plaintiffs A, B, and C from then on after that.
Then we'll be doing B1 and 2 further.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
That's all for housekeeping matters. I believe my co-counsel Sarah Schneidman may have a few housekeeping matters simply because she's on Zoom. She might want to take care of that.
All right.
Good Judge Sarah Schneidman representing the plaintiff. Since I'm not there in person, we'd like to ask your permission from my opposing counsel, when appropriate, to physically maneuver any documents or evidence while I'm questioning or cross-examining witnesses.
Yes, that will make sure that happens. We got somebody to go through.
Thank you.
With that, Your Honor, we're ready to move to motion in limine if the bench is ready as well.
Yes, go ahead.
For our first motion in limine, Your Honor, the plaintiffs would like to move into evidence what would be Plaintiff's Exhibit 1. This is the autopsy report. It can be found on page 108 of the record. This is an autopsy report itself authenticating as a public document. It is the autopsy for the cause of death, daily use of methotrexate, that caused the death of Mrs. Goldblum. Of course, we'll hear more about this in today's trial, but at this time, we'd like to move this into evidence as Plaintiff's Exhibit 1, or A, excuse me.
What's the defendant's response?
We have no objection, Your Honor.
Okay.
May I approach and tender to the bench?
Sure, absolutely. Not to be. All right. So that'll be marked as exhibit plaintiff P1 and admitted into evidence.
At this time, for our second motion in limine, my co-counsel Sarah Schneidman will be taking care of that, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Under the hearsay rules 801 and 802 and relevance rule, we move to exclude Mrs. Harris's release from liability. Ms. Harris is not a party to the matter, and her release of liability would not serve any evidentiary value in proving the truth of the matter in the case. And we feel that the omission of this document would unfairly prejudice and confuse the material issue at trial.
What's the defendant's response?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. I'll be granted. You're striking the release of liability of Anna Harris.
At this time, the plaintiff is ready for opening statements, Your Honor.
Do y'all have any preliminary motions?
We do not have any preliminary motions.
All right. Have y'all agreed upon time on opening statements?
Yeah, we have our timekeeper there. Yes, Your Honor. We have our timekeeper.
2-minute warning.
And my co-counsel Sarah Schneidman will be taking our opening statement.
All right. I need to hit this.
So you can proceed?
You got it? Okay. All right. You're ready. You recognize the seat on opening statement.
May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. Facts are going to drive the train of justice in this case. And our train has left the station, traveling at the speed of greed. Mr. Dellinger, my co-counsel, and I hope that our final destination is where you find RX2Me liable for the unfortunate and untimely death of Mrs. Linda Goldblum. Along the way, we intend to prove that RX2Me failed in their duty of care when their error resulted in the distribution of a deadly, high alert medication with fatal dosing instructions written on the bottle. As a lawyer, I was taught the importance of the written word by my legal writing professor. And as such, I'd like to show you my recent prescription bottle. Full disclosure, this bottle was mine, not Mrs. Goldblum's. But I wouldn't be surprised if it looks similar. You know, I don't remember anything about the pharmacist who filled my prescription. So aren't I thankful to have written dosage instructions printed right here on the bottle? Take 1 capsule by mouth every 12 hours for 7 days. The facts of this case were set in motion on October 15th, 2019. That was pre-COVID, when the world seemed a simpler and safer place, when people went about their daily lives without the fear of getting sick at any moment. On that day in October, Linda Goldblum was released from hospital care. She was comforted by how her nurse took her time to care for her, which included calling in her prescription to RX2Me. Linda's nurse didn't seem to be motivated by a speed of greed. At home, Linda was comforted by her 3 lovely children, a young and energetic 5-year-old, a curious 7-year-old, and a mischievous 13-year-old. Robert Goldblum, Linda's husband, whom you'll hear from later, did what any loving husband would do. He ran all the household errands, including making a stop at RX2Me to pick up his wife's prescription. You'll likely hear Robert say that he relies on the doctor's or other medically trained professionals' knowledge in relation to his family's medication needs. That reliance, that confidence in medically trained professionals ultimately led to the death of his lovely wife, Linda. How would he have known that his trust was misplaced? How could he have known that? Robert failed to realize that RX2Me's speed of greed was to blame. And now his beloved wife, Linda, is dead. Her children will grow up without a loving mother. Her now 6-year-old probably won't even remember her. The facts are simple and aren't going to change. The RX2Me pharmacist gave Mr. Goldblum an incorrect prescription with fatal dosing instructions printed on the bottle, which resulted in the death of his wife, Mrs. Linda Goldblum. The facts can be summarized using 4 words: duty, breach, causation, injury. We expect the defense might try to put the blame on anyone but their own speed of greed. They might place blame on Miss Harris, that naive intern, whom you'll also hear from later, or even try to blame Robert, the grieving widow. After all the facts have been presented, we think that you'll come to the same conclusion that we did, that RX2Me's speed of greed not only caused, but profited from Linda's unfortunate and untimely death. Robert relied on, no, he trusted RX2Me to provide his family with optimal, patient-centered care. RX2Me is a pharmacy. That is their business. But unfortunately, the only thing their speed of greed allowed them to see were dollar signs. Please make things right by finding RX2Me liable for Linda Goldblum's death. Robert Goldblum and his 3 young children are counting on you to do the right thing. Find RX2Me liable.
Thank you. In this council, you recognize your vote in this state.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Harley David, and as I indicated earlier, I represent the defendants in this lawsuit, RX2Me. And I'd first like to thank you all for being here today, for doing your civic duty as jurors. It is a very important role, and my clients are surely grateful for it. I know it's inconvenient in this modern age to have to give up a whole day to be a juror, but rest assured, we're grateful for it. And there's really only going to be 3 witnesses in this case. You're going to hear from my expert witness, Joe Baskin, Steve Tigret, and Nina Rhodes. And then you're going to hear from the plaintiff. There's a few exhibits you'll have the opportunity to review, and that's pretty much going to be it. And you are the trier of the fact of the case. You will hear from, the judge determines the law, but y'all have to determine what the facts are, what happens in the case, and I trust that you will reserve your judgment until you've heard all of the evidence. The plaintiff in this case has the burden of proof. That means that they have to make, and they've got to prove to you that by preponderance of the evidence, it was more likely so than not that their version of the events are true. We don't have that burden. Now, the plaintiff is going to put on their case first, and then we will have the opportunity to put on our case after. And we trust that you will keep an open mind throughout the entire process and reserve your judgment until you've heard all the evidence. And I trust you will put any feelings aside and just weigh the evidence as you receive it. Today during trial, you will hear that we had depositions taken in the discovery process. That's the sworn statement under oath where we created written transcripts in the case. Now the plaintiff is indicating that the bottle was mislabeled. And after all the testimony was taken in this case, in the deposition, I retained a pharmacist to explain the standard of care of a pharmacist. This standard of care involves the proper method of pharmacists giving patients verbal instruction about pharmaceutical drugs. Today, you're going to hear RX2Me's intern mistakenly prescribed methotrexate instead of metolazone. But Nina Rhodes, corporate representative for RX2Me, is going to testify that pharmacists are expected and required to use professional judgment. And you're going to hear RX2Me gave Mrs. Goldblum a mislabeled prescription bottle dosage, and now she's dead. But here's where our version of the events come in. Mrs. Goldblum didn't pick up the prescription. It was her husband, Mr. Goldblum, who did. Now there's salient facts in the case. Mr. Goldblum was given verbal instruction from his pharmacist to relay to his wife. But Mr. Goldblum valued his own discretion of medication more than the instruction of a pharmacist. Take once weekly. 3 simple words that Mr. Goldblum should have told his wife. Now, Mr. Goldblum is going to testify that he had no knowledge of pharmaceutical drugs, and we admit that we looked at the record, and yes, Mr. Goldblum is a local banker in Oxford, Mississippi, but he was married to a woman who was prescribed medications throughout their marriage. He's going to testify that he does not remember if he relayed the pharmacist's instructions to his wife. So that's the evidence you're going to hear today. And I think you will find in weighing that it is more likely so than not, or you can't make a decision if the scales of justice are evenly balanced in your mind, that the plaintiff hasn't met the burden of proof and tipped them in your favor. It is more likely than not that the pharmacist did the obvious correct thing by telling Mr. Goldblum the correct instruction, which is what pharmacists are trained to do. And that if the plaintiff would have relayed this instruction to Mrs. Goldblum to take once weekly, the tragic death would not have occurred. With that, I thank you again and look forward to closing this trial today.
All right, who is the plaintiff's first witness?
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff's called Dr. Fast to the stand.
Dr. Fast. Let's come forward and witness stand over. Swear your witness.
Commissioner, you start the well. May I proceed?
You may.
Doctor, can you please state your name for the record?
Dr. Billy Fast.
And Dr. Fast, what do you do for a living?
I am an expert in pharmaceutical outcomes. I work at the University of Florida. I'm a graduate coordinator for the Department of Pharmaceutical Outcomes and Policy. I also teach courses, one of which includes a pharmacy class.
You said your job is pharmaceutical outcomes. What does that mean?
That means people come to me when something is wrong, whether this is an interaction between the pharmacist and the patient, or whether it's behind the counter between pharmacists and staff. I study the miscommunications that take place in the pharmacy and how those occur.
And what kind of education does it take to get into that field?
Well, I have 3 degrees from the University of Nebraska, one of which is a Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education, a Master's in Educational Psychology, and a PhD in Counseling Psychology.
Okay, so how does that education apply to your job?
I understand people, and I understand how to educate and to counsel. I understand how instruction between supervisors and employees should look because of my degree in education, and further, I understand how people communicate because of my PhD in counseling psychology.
Doctor, have you written any peer-reviewed articles?
Yes, I've written 5 that are published, 2 of which are especially notable in today's case, one of which is about interactions between supervisors and interns in a pharmacy, and then the other is about pharmacist-patient interaction in the pharmacy.
Well, how much actual work have you done in the field?
I've done a ton of work in the field. One of my most recent projects was working with the FDA to release leaflets that are now available in community pharmacies. It's about pharmacist-patient interaction.
And do you often review cases like today's?
Yes, I do, in a research capacity and also when I'm helping to create more effective regulations.
And in doing so, what materials do you need?
Usually I look over the state regulations and the employee handbook from the pharmacy involved, and also I do interviews.
Well, what materials did you actually receive for today's case?
For today, I looked over the MPPR, that's the state law in Mississippi, also RX2Me's employee handbook, and I did not do interviews in this case because I had all the information I needed from the depositions and affidavits.
Were these materials sufficient in forming a conclusion?
Yes.
And these materials that you reviewed and these methods that you've spoken about, are these common practice in your field?
Yes, they are. We cannot be at every pharmacy all the time, so these are pretty standard things that I collect in order to review cases like today.
At this time, the plaintiffs would like to tender Dr. Fast as an expert in the field of pharmaceuticals.
Response from the defendant, would you like to board hour the expert?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, no objection. Dr. Fast will be accepted as an expert in the field of pharmaceutical outcomes. You may proceed.
Thank you. Dr. Fast, why are you here today?
I'm here to testify about the death of Ms. Goldblum.
And in reviewing today's case, did you come to any conclusions?
Yes, I did, a few.
Were those conclusions made to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes.
And you said you had a few. Let's talk about your first conclusion. What was that?
First, Mr. Tigert, the pharmacist, violated the MPPR.
You talked about the MPPR a couple times now. What is that again?
That's the state law in Mississippi. It's the Mississippi Pharmacy Practice Regulations, and every pharmacist must practice under these rules.
Well, you said there was a violation of the law. What violation was that?
This law requires that any intern in pharmacy must act under the direct supervision of a pharmacist.
Okay, direct supervision. What might that look like?
In this case, with Anna Harris taking this verbal order, Mr. Tigert could have either listened in on this call with her, or he could have called the nurse back and double checked that the prescription order that Anna took was correct, but he did neither.
So just to be clear, there was not direct supervision?
No.
And that's a violation of the law?
Yes.
Well, how could Mr. Tigert have known that this would be important?
Mr. Tigert, as a pharmacist, is familiar with the state regulations in Mississippi, and he's required to practice under those. And they're readily available for him to reference at any time if he needed to.
All right, well, let's move on to another conclusion. What was your second conclusion in today's case?
My second conclusion is that methotrexate is a high alert drug according to the ISMP, and that is the Institute for Safe Medication Practices. And they're the authority who designates high alert drugs.
High alert drug. Now, how would Mr. Tiger have known that it was a high alert drug?
Mr. Tigrett, as a pharmacist, he's required to be familiar with these drugs. And every year, annually, the ISMP releases a list of what these drugs are, and they should be handled with special care.
You said special care. What might that look like? What are those checks?
Well, first, Mr. Tigrett should have noticed that Anna Harris took the prescription. She was a new student intern, and that should have been a red flag. And she took this prescription for several drugs, one being a high alert drug for a patient who was just discharged from the hospital. He should have called the nurse to verify before dispensing methotrexate.
And you talked about the prescription taken by Anna Harris. If I showed you that prescription pad today, would you recognize it?
Okay.
Permission to approach, Your Honor?
You may.
For court and counsel, I am showing opposing counsel what has been previously marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 2. It is the prescription pad marked down by Anna Harris. Dr. Fast, what have I just placed in front of you?
This is a copy of the prescription order taken by Anna Harris at RX2Me Pharmacy for Ms. Goldblum.
How do you know that?
I received this in the materials that were in the packet to review for today's case.
And since you reviewed it, has it been changed or altered in any way?
No.
And will this aid you in your testimony today?
Yes, it will.
At this time, the plaintiff moves for what's been previously marked as Plaintiff's 2 to be entered into evidence as Plaintiff's B.
No objection, Your Honor.
Entered it into.
All right, Dr. Fast, what does this tell you?
Well, this tells us a lot. So number one, the date of birth taken for Ms. Goldblum was incorrect on the prescription, along with the nurse's name who called in the order, and the drug name, which therefore affects the dosing instructions as well.
And were these things important?
Yes, these are crucial pieces of information when taking a prescription order, and this should have been noticed.
You talked about the age. How might the age affect a drug?
Well, the age is very important in the safety of medications, especially high alert medications. Drugs can affect different age groups differently. And Mr. Tigrett, should have noticed this in several ways, including looking at the patient's medication history, checking for an indication for methotrexate. Any of these mistakes on the prescription order should have been very apparent to him.
You mentioned the patient's medication history. If I showed you that today, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Permission to approach again, Your Honor? For court and counsel, I'm showing opposing counsel has been previously marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 3. It is the patient history. I'm approaching the witness with the same. Dr. Fast, what have I just placed in front of you?
This is a copy of Ms. Goldblum's patient medication history from RX2Me.
And how do you know that?
This was given to me in the packet of materials for review for today by you.
Has it been changed or altered in any way since your review?
It has not.
Will this help you in your testimony today?
Yes.
At this time, the plaintiff's moved for what has been previously marked as Plaintiff's 3 to be entered as Plaintiff's C.
The objection from the defendant.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, that'll be marked and then as exhibit trial to C.
All right, doctor, what did this tell you?
This medication history indicates that Mrs. Goldblum already had an active prescription for methotrexate, the same drug that was prescribed here. And it had 64 pills left on the prescription. So that should have been alarming, as well as the dosing instructions for the new prescription are vastly different from the one on her medication history already.
Thank you, doctor. Doctor, when we talked about what you do, you talked about what happens in front of the counter with counseling. Was there any counseling done in today's case?
Yes, there was, but it was insufficient.
How so?
Mr. Tiger's deposition reflected that the patient counseling he performed was very different from the instructions that were written on the pill bottle.
And if I show you that pill bottle instruction, do you recognize it?
Yes.
Permission to approach again, Your Honor.
You may.
Approaching opposing counsel has been previously marked as plaintiff's exhibit 4. Approaching the witness with the same. For court and counsel, this is the pill bottle instruction. Dr. Fast, what have I just shown you?
This is a copy of the label on Miss Goldblum's prescription bottle for methotrexate.
And how do you know that?
This was given to me in the packet of materials to review for today by you.
And has it been changed or altered in any way since you reviewed?
No, it hasn't.
Will this aid you in your testimony today?
Yes, it will.
At this time, the plaintiffs would like to move in what has been previously marked as plaintiff's 4 and as plaintiff's D.
All right. Response from the defendant.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, that will be marked and admitted as exhibit B.
All right, doctor, what does this pill bottle instruction show you?
This label instructs Ms. Goldblum to take 1 tablet by mouth every day, but Mr. Tigert, the pharmacist, just told Ms. Goldblum to take the tablet once weekly, and he told Mr. Goldblum this and then did not verify his understanding of the information, and it resulted in him leaving the pharmacy with her bottle having different instructions than what he was told. And so this was a communication error.
So you've mentioned a few of those communication errors. Why were those communication errors made?
Because of speed and greed.
And doctor, in your review, who do you believe is liable for the miscommunications and the wrong instructions going out?
RX to me pharmacy and Mr. Tigert.
Do you believe that Mr. Goldblum is at all at fault?
No.
I have no further questions, Your Honor. I tender my witness for cross-examination. Permission to publish evidence to the jury?
Sir.
And retrieve, Your Honor. And they're going to publish on. Oh, that's all. And then there's the prescription. Patient history.
All right, cross-examination by the defendant. We have 4 exhibits right now, correct? A, B, C, and D. You sir, the defendant needs to use that. We put it over here on the witness stand. You may proceed.
Dr. Fast, when did you start working at the University of Florida?
In 2002,
And what did you get a bachelor's in?
Bachelor's of Science in Secondary Education.
And you have a master's in educational psychology, correct?
That's correct.
And a PhD in counseling psychology?
Yes, that's correct.
Now you have the
Objection,
opportunity.
Your Honor. This line of questioning is improper. They were given a chance to voir dire and they did not. The foundation for this witness as an expert in her experience has already gone through. I believe that this is going to confuse the jury if we allow this type of questioning to occur.
I won't allow it. Your objection is overruled.
Now, Dr. Fast, you had the opportunity to discuss this case with the plaintiffs, correct?
That's correct.
And you only reviewed the information provided by opposing counsel, correct?
That's correct, but I have very extensive prior knowledge.
And this is an important part of your information gathering process, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, the plaintiffs have identified you in court papers as one of their experts in pharmaceutical outcomes, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But just to clarify, you do not consider yourself to be an expert in pharmacy standards of care, do you?
No, I do not, but I have extensive knowledge of the subject and pharmaceutical outcomes and the errors that take place in a pharmacy.
What was your primary opinion in your expert report?
That RX to me is liable for this mistake that caused Ms. Goldblum's death.
And you testified on direct examination that Mr. Tigert offered insufficient counseling, correct?
Yeah,
Do you consider that to be outside of the standard of care?
yeah, that's part of what I study is pharmaceutical outcomes and how they occurred, and that was a communication error.
You, however, have never had experience in the field of pharmacy, have you?
No, not directly.
So you've never maintained a clinical practice
No, not directly.
or worked in a clinical setting?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so you explained that your opinion regarding standard of care was based on the review, correct, of the materials?
Yes, that's correct. Those are the materials that I review for every case. It's a standard for me.
Okay. And the truth is you never went to pharmacy school, true?
That's true.
And the truth is you're not a pharmacist, correct?
That's correct.
And the subject of what a pharmacist should or should not know has never been the primary focus of any of your books or articles you've written, correct?
That's correct, but 2 of my publications are about how they should instruct patients in that way.
And the subject has never been the primary focus of any of the courses you've developed or taught.
No, but as I said before, I do teach one course to pharmacy students, so I'm very familiar with this subject.
Isn't it true that the quality of care and standard of care are 2 different categories?
Yes, that's true.
And you have a strong background in pharmaceutical outcomes.
I do.
And so you're aware that pharmaceutical outcomes in a field examines the quality of care, correct?
It does, yes.
But you testified that you are knowledgeable of the standard of care.
Not of a pharmacist, but in my expertise, pharmaceutical outcomes, yes.
But in your expert report, you did talk about the standard of care, correct?
Yes, I did.
So are you suggesting to us that you know how to interpret the pharmacist standard of care with a background in quality of care?
No, I'm not. That's not what I testified as. I am I'm testifying on the behalf of the communication errors that took place. That's what I specialize in.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor. I'll ask my witness to be allowed to sit down.
All right, you may be excused.
My co-counsel will be handling our next direct advantage.
Who is plaintiff's next witness?
Next witness, Your Honor, we'd like to call Mr. Robert Goldblum.
Come to the witness stand, exit.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you please tell the court your first and last name?
Sure, Robert Goldblum.
Before October of last year, what was going on in your life?
So I had my loving wife that was with me and my family of 3. We have 3 children, ages 5, 7, and 12.
And what happened to change that?
Well, unfortunately, about a year ago, my wife passed away due to RX-to-Nevis pharmacy giving her the wrong medication.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear about that. I'd like to hear more about that in a moment, but first of all, what is your profession?
I work here as a banker in Oxford, Mississippi.
And what does that entail?
So my work as a banker entails counseling patients on their counseling customers on their financial status, maintaining accurate records, and providing customer service.
What type of education do you have to do that job?
I have a degree in finance from the University of Mississippi.
Do you have any medical training?
No, none at all.
How would you describe your knowledge of prescribed medication?
I have none whatsoever. I've never taken prescription medications in my life.
Okay, so now, even though I know it's painful, I'd like to ask you a few questions about what happened a little over a year ago. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think I'll be okay.
Okay. What happened on October 15th of last year?
Well, if I recall correctly, that was the day that my wife was discharged from the hospital.
And And after your wife was discharged, what did you do?
So my wife was on bed rest, so I went to run a few errands, and one of that included picking up her medications that were called into the pharmacy.
And which pharmacy did you go to?
RX3 in Oxford, Mississippi.
But wait a second. I thought you said earlier that you didn't have any medical training. What made you think that you were qualified to pick up your wife's prescription?
Just because anyone can really pick up the medication. I mean, the instructions are always written on the bottle.
Okay. Upon picking up Linda's prescription, were you counseled on the medication?
Yes, I believe I was told to tell her to take it once a week.
And how did you know you could be counseled on that medication?
They typically always offer counseling at the pharmacy.
So would you say that if they typically always offered it, that it was optional to get oral counseling?
Yeah, it seemed optional. They had a screen where you could ask if you wanted to talk to the pharmacist or not.
Okay, and did you, what did the pharmacist tell you about the dosage of the medication?
He told me that it was like an incorrect or high abnormal dosage, and that what the was written on the bottle to disregard that and tell her to take it once a week.
And did you pass that very important information along to your wife?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. It was a very busy and hectic day. I might have, but I might not.
And why not?
Because during that day, I had 3 screaming children that were with me at the pharmacy. They were upset and crying, and it was just a very stressful time. So if I didn't pass it on, that would be the next thing.
And actually, let me go back to clarify something. Did the pharmacist actually say anything about what was printed on the bottle?
He said that what was printed on the bottle was not the right dosing that it should normally be.
Okay. What happened after, okay, so now let's fast forward to November, almost a year ago. What happened after you gave your wife the prescription?
So I gave her the prescription, and about a week later, unfortunately, she passed.
That's unfortunate. I'm so sorry for your loss. How has your life changed since your wife's unfortunate and untimely death?
My life has been turned upside down. She was the main breadwinner in our home, so financially we're really struggling. My family's having to go through counseling, and my children are having a really hard time as well as myself.
And how has the death of your wife affect your children? You said they had a really hard time.
Yeah, they've just been acting up. They really miss their mother, and every day they ask when she's going to come home.
Okay, nothing further, but I would like to reserve some time for redirect, and I tender this witness for cross.
All right, thank you. Witness, you have cross-examination. Mr. Goldblum.
Good morning, Mr. Goldblum.
Good morning.
You received a finance degree from the University of Mississippi, correct?
That is correct.
And you're currently a banker at a local bank in Oxford, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you testified you're not medically trained in any capacity.
Yes, I have no medical knowledge.
And Mr. Goldblum, were you aware that your wife had been prescribed medications in the past for a variety of issues?
Yes, I was aware she had prescription medications.
But you never knew the names, dosage, and the reason she was taking them. Isn't that true?
Objection, calls for speculation. The part about aware of medications.
I'm gonna overrule your objection. I think she just asked you back about what he knew. He testifies to his personal knowledge about what medication he personally used. You may proceed.
And you did not see a need to monitor your wife's medications and learn what they all were, correct?
No, she always wanted to handle that herself.
Mr. Goldblum, isn't it true that when you picked up your wife's prescription, you were provided prescription counseling?
Yes, the pharmacist mentioned that it was the wrong dosing on the bottle, and he told me to pass that information along to her.
What were the instructions that he told you regarding the methotrexate prescription?
To tell her to take it once a week.
Now, isn't it true that you told the pharmacist you would pass this information to your wife?
Yes.
Do you think it's important to share medication information regarding health and well-being with your wife?
Yes, it is to a certain extent, but I then agree that it should have been on the bottle correctly.
And did you share the pharmacist's instructions about the medication with your wife?
Objection, asked and answered. He already said.
Overall, I'm allowed question that.
Can you repeat the question?
Did you share the pharmacist's instructions with your wife?
I don't recall, like I said, it was a very hectic day, very emotional day, so I don't recall off the top of my head if I shared it with her or not.
Okay. Do you think the fact that you didn't counsel your wife on the medication caused her death?
No, not at all.
And you're not a medical professional, correct?
I'm not a medical professional.
So just to be clear, you're testifying that the bottle should have been correct. Everyone reads the bottle for their dosage, correct?
Yes, that's what I believe the pharmacist's job is, to get the correct dosage on the bottle.
Okay, so let me see if I understand this. You're not knowledgeable of any prescription medication.
That's correct.
So you don't actually know if instructions are always printed on the prescription bottle, do you?
Prescriptions are always on the bottle. I mean, I've seen prescription bottles before. I've just never taken any medications myself.
But you just said you had no knowledge of prescription medication.
I have no knowledge on what they're used for. I know what is on a prescription bottle.
And on the day you picked up her prescription, you did not ask the pharmacist any follow-up questions, correct?
That's correct.
But you were responsible for picking up the prescription for your wife.
That's correct.
Did you even look at the medication while at the pharmacy to confirm your wife's name was on the label?
Yes, I looked at the bottle.
Now turning to the days before your wife's death, you didn't counsel your wife on the medication, correct?
Like I said, it was really hard to recall. I don't believe I did, but I could have. It was a very hectic day.
And you were asked at your deposition, do you think that the fact you didn't counsel your wife on the medication caused her death? Do you remember this?
I believe so.
And once again, you answered, I'm not a medical professional, correct?
That is correct.
So are you saying that one has to be a medical professional to follow simple directions from a pharmacist?
No, but I believe the directions should be written on the bottle.
I didn't ask you about the bottle, Mr. Goldblum. I asked you about the counseling you received.
Can you repeat the question?
So the reason you didn't counsel your wife is because you're not a medical professional.
I don't think it's my job to counsel her. I think it's the pharmacist's job.
Mrs. Goldblum took the medicine every day as the bottle indicated, correct?
That is correct.
So just to clarify, once a day for 15 days.
That is correct.
And you mentioned she started not feeling well, correct?
Yes.
And when did she start not feeling well?
She started not feeling well, I would say maybe 4 days after we picked up the medication.
Okay. And your wife still continued to take the medication, correct?
That's correct.
Have you ever heard of a skin disorder called psoriasis?
Your Honor, objection, Your Honor, relevancy.
Well, I'm gonna respond.
Your Honor, I'm going to the fact that his wife did have certain disorders and skin disorders that she was prescribed medications for.
Okay, all right, we're on now. If there's evidence that she had this condition, so objection overruled.
Were you aware that your wife had psoriasis?
Yes, I was aware she had that.
Were you aware that she was previously prescribed methotrexate for such skin disorder?
I was not aware of the medications.
Now, isn't it true that you waited several days before taking your wife to the hospital?
Yes, we waited because it was just cold flu-like symptoms, so we were not worried at first.
But you're not medically trained in any capacity, correct?
That's correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. I just have a couple of quick questions. Mr. Goldblum, what was in the bottle that you were given?
They determined that it was the incorrect medication.
Okay. And what was written on the bottle that you were given?
The fatal dosing instructions that ultimately killed my wife.
And yeah, you just said this, but can you repeat what happened after your wife took the incorrect medication at the incorrect dosage?
She died about a week later.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right. Witness be excused.
Yeah, we asked this witness to be allowed to step down. At this time, the plaintiff's call Anna Harrison stand.
All right, Ms. Harris, can you come forward, take the witness stand?
Yes, you
You right.
Ms. Harris, may I reconstruct the while you're on?
As long as you be saying, not saying.
Good morning, Ms. Harris.
Good morning.
Do you mind telling the jury what you do for a living?
I'm a pharmacy intern on prescriptions and I'm a pharmacy student at the University of Mississippi.
And how long have you worked at prescription with me?
Well, I worked there before in the floral department before I switched to the pharmacy the past few months.
And when you switched over to the pharmacy, did you receive any training?
No formal training.
Who's your supervisor?
Dr. Tigret.
What-
Sorry.
Okay, so how do you know that he's your supervisor?
I usually worked with him. And
Okay.
the pharmacist that was on duty was over the whole pharmacy.
So what training did he give you?
No formal training, but you learn as you go.
No videos,
No videos.
no verbal instruction?
No formal verbal instruction. Like I said, it's on the job.
All right, well, I'm going to direct you to October 15th of 2019. Do you remember that day?
Yes, a little.
Okay, so what happened that day?
Well, I was really busy that day and I was the one that took the phone call.
You said it was busy. And you talked about a phone call. What phone call was that?
For Mrs. Goldblum's prescription.
And who called you?
The nurse.
And what did you do when she called you?
I wrote down the medications that the nurse was telling me onto a prescription pad.
Okay, so when you took it down the prescription pad, what did you do next?
Well, after the phone call, I put it into the computer, but I wasn't sure about one of them, so I used the drop down menu.
You talked about a drag down menu. What is that?
So I only heard MET, and I was really confused. And like I said, I was really nervous because I'm new. So I typed in MET, and I looked at previous prescriptions that she's taken, the patient's taken, and I saw methotrexate, so that's the one I chose.
Okay. Going back to that call we talked about earlier, who was on the call with you?
Besides me and the nurse.
Was that all?
Well, Dr. Tigert was in the pharmacy.
But was he on the call?
No.
Okay. So you've taken down the prescription, you've used the drop down menu. What happened next?
Well, I put the medications into her profile so they could be filled.
Okay. And did anything else happen after that?
Dr. Tigert did look at it, but he didn't say anything else to me.
So when was the first time that Dr. Tigert saw this prescription?
Well, the first time he looked at it, he looked at it before I put it in, but then he didn't say anything to me, and then he looked at it on his computer to check it.
Okay. So did you have any interaction with the prescription after that?
No, I did not.
Do you know what happened with it?
I saw that Dr. Tigert was talking to someone about it, yes.
Okay. And what happened during that conversation?
Well, I overheard him talking about how, I remember him saying the dosage was right on it, but to take it weekly, which I was confused about since I put daily into the computer.
Okay. You're an employee of Prescription to Me, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
And you get paid by them?
Yes,
You're supposed to be trained by them?
yes.
And no further question, Your Honor. Is that, Your Honor, I attend a witness for cross-examination.
All right, cross-examination.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Ms. Harris.
Good morning.
Were you eager to learn when you started your internship at RX to Me?
Yes, I was.
And were you aware that corporate felt confident in your abilities?
I did.
Isn't it true that you did not make routine errors with Dr. Chirka as your supervisor?
Not usually, no.
And isn't it true that you were allowed to handle prescriptions?
Yes,
Now, Ms. Harris, Mr. Tigert typically checked behind you as you completed search tasks, correct?
yes,
And isn't it true that he would bring these mistakes to your attention?
yes, you would.
And he had been doing so since the start of your tenure at
Yes.
RX.
Yes,
Now, on the day you logged in Mrs. Goldblum's prescription, isn't it true that Mr. Tigert found no errors and proceeded to enter the prescription into the
he didn't say anything to me, so I assume no.
And there were no errors to your knowledge at this time.
Yeah, no,
And Ms. Harris, Mr. Tigert was nearby when you answered the phone from Nurse Jennings, correct?
he's in the pharmacy, yes.
And you could have asked questions at any time.
I could have.
Moving on. Ms. Harris, you received no training in logging prescription orders while working at Art Suite, correct?
No formal training.
But you used the computer's jot down menu to enter the medication.
I did.
So is it fair to say that you received some training on how to use the system? Is that correct?
A little bit, but no formal training.
Now, Ms. Harris, are you licensed by the Mississippi Board of Pharmacy to work as a pharmacy intern?
I am.
And do you consider yourself to be a good student?
I did before this.
Now, Ms. Harris, on the day you took Nurse Jennings' phone call about Ms. Goldblum's prescription, you took handwritten notes, is that correct?
I did.
And you wrote down the medication order, the name, and the birthday, correct?
Can you repeat that question again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear
You
you.
wrote down the name, the birthday, and the prescription order, is that correct?
Yes,
And you take notes in pharmacy school, is that correct?
yes.
Did you receive any training on how to take notes in pharmacy school?
Or in class?
For a class, yes.
No, you just learn as you go through school.
So is it fair to say you already knew how to take notes prior to pharmacy school and learn?
Yes,
Ms. Harris, isn't it true that you wrote down Mrs. Goldblum's prescription order?
I did.
And you took phone call prescription orders generally, correct?
Yes, I did.
Is it fair to say that taking phone calls and writing down orders is a simple task?
It is.
Now, can you tell me about the pharmacy's metrics for the quarter at the time of the incident?
I knew that we were down in the number of prescriptions that we were putting out.
And were you brushed by Mr. Tigert at any time?
He did tell me to pick up the pace, but I knew that was just to be more efficient in what I was doing.
And when was this that he told you?
He told me after I got off the phone call.
And so to clarify, you were not told to pick up the pace until after you finished the phone call?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right,
No redirect, Your Honor. I ask my witness to be allowed to step down.
all right, you may be excused, Ms. Harris.
At this time, the plan closes its case in chief. We ask for a brief recess, maybe about 5 minutes.
We'll have a recess for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
No, it's okay. I'm done with that. I just feel like I didn't want to say the word how I don't yeah, it's just easy. I want to like as much as possible. Like every day, I get to see how it's going to be. Yeah. Yeah, I'll be going
And all that. Yeah. Okay.
Y'all are doing basket tiger roads. Roads tiger basket.
For those on Zoom, I'm trying to get a microphone for the judge. If you have any other issues, please feel free to privately chat me. My name's Lynette Potter. You can just chat me on Zoom.
Y'all can hear me okay. The attorneys can hear me okay. It's just out there.
Yeah, and I can hear you, and I'm logged in on Zoom, but some people said that they can't. It's right here.
You can't look it up.
Probably. It'll help for now. I did get IT. They did say that they are working on bringing a microphone up here.
Is there any way you can test the voice right now?
Yes. Not yet.
What? Sarah, can you hear me? Is my mic on this mic? Can you hear me better?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Better now? Okay. We pulled this spaceship up here.
Yeah.
Sarah, can you still hear advocates well? Like, can you hear me okay? Okay.
Oh, okay. That picks up the attorneys.
Yes, it took it set like this entire area.
Oh,
here.
okay. Well.
But I think that they're speaking just fine.
Okay.
So.
Well, they don't have a plexiglass blocking them.
Yeah. Advocates, I've moved the microphone so they can hear the judge a little better.
Here's the tech guy.
There's one.
That one's good. We couldn't hear him.
You got a mic up here? Is this a mic? No, that's not a mic.
I hear you loud and clear, Judge.
Yeah, y'all don't have to use this. I can use this other witness stand
Oh,
now.
yeah.
If it'll reach, I might have to.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's gonna drop.
Is this a cable right here?
It is.
Okay, so you can hook it into that. Perfect.
See how easy this will be.
All right. Now we're in business.
Okay. Sarah, how does the judge sound now?
Test 1, 2, 3, test 1, 2, 3. All right, we're back in business.
Okay.
We're in business.
For those on YouTube, I'm still trying to fix the view. I'm sorry. Okay, you may proceed.
All right, ready? Come back into order. Plaintiffs, you recognize?
The plaintiff's rest.
All right. Plaintiff's rest. All right. Defendant, you have your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Before then, the defense would like to make a motion for judgment as a matter of law as to the claims of negligence and wrongful death. Based on the evidence and facts submitted to the jury, no reasonable jury would have a legally sufficient evidentiary basis to find for the defendant as to the issue.
All right. In response from the plaintiff as to the motion?
Yes, Your Honor. In response, we would like to establish what we've seen here today in today's case. We have a standard of care, which is one of the defenses brought by the defense. It's the law, Your Honor. It's the NPPR. And there was a clear violation of that law, as spoken on by our expert witness, an expert in pharmaceutical outcomes. Beyond that, we have the attached liability when we had an intern and an employee of RX to me speak on the miscommunications that happened and the mistakes that were made, and how the prescription that went across the counter to Mr. Goldblum was incorrect. We also had Mr. Goldblum take today's stand, and he talked about how when he received the medication, that the pill bottle was incorrect. The jury has plenty of information, they have plenty of evidence to review, and there's more than enough for a reasonable jury to find for the plaintiff in today's case.
All right. Any rebuttal from the defendant?
Your Honor, at this point, like I said, the plaintiff has not shown that there is any other issue, and
All right. The court feels like the plaintiff has met its burden, therefore your motion is denied. And the defense may proceed with this case.
yes, Your Honor, we would like to call Nina Rhodes to stand.
Ms. Rhodes, you may come inside the bar and please take a seat at the witness stand.
May I proceed?
You may.
Ms. Rhodes, please introduce yourself to the court.
Yes, my name is Nina Rhodes. I'm a corporate representative for RX to me.
And what brings you to court today?
The matter of Ms. Goldblum's death.
And how long have you been the corporate representative for RX to me?
I'm coming up on 10 years.
Now, as corporate representative, do you have extensive knowledge of the practices and procedures at RX to me Pharmacy here in Oxford?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell me about the training of the employees at RX to me?
We expect our pharmacists to train new employees on filling medications, entering prescriptions, and doing so in the safest way possible.
And does this include specific training in how to log prescription orders?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell me the normal procedure at RxMe when taking prescriptions?
We usually expect our pharmacists to take the prescription over the phone, and they should be writing everything down as they're taking it, clarify any miscommunications, and then enter it into our computer system to be filled.
Now, can you tell me about RxMe's pharmacy quality commitment manual?
Yes, these are just to put in place to make sure that our patients are receiving the best care possible.
And can you tell me if a pharmacist can fulfill the manual's recommendation by counseling, by advising dosage requirements to anyone other than the patient?
Objection, in this line of questioning, Rule 901, authentication of the manual. It hasn't been entered.
I don't think you have to enter the manual into evidence to ask questions about it. So I'm gonna overrule your objection and you may proceed.
Right. I am going to, sorry, would you recognize this document if I showed it to you?
Yes, ma'am.
May I approach her?
Yes, you may.
I'm approaching opposing counsel with a copy of the manual. And this is what. Ms. Rose, can you read what it says under the second bullet point?
If the patient is not picking up the prescription themselves, the pharmacist must talk with the individual picking the medication up to explain the most important aspects of the medication. The pharmacist will provide a med guide to be sent home and will provide the most appropriate contact information so the patient is able to call and ask questions if need be.
And so to clarify, under the PQC manual, pharmacists are authorized to counsel someone other than the patient.
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor. Attended this witness request.
Excuse me, what was that last point?
I attended this witness
All right,
request.
thank you. You may claim to cross-examine.
My co-counsel began the question.
Oh, okay. You're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes, for being here today. Do you recall answering questions during your deposition on Wednesday, July 15th of this year?
Yes, ma'am.
And as a corporate representative, would you say that you have extensive knowledge of the practices and procedures of the RxMe pharmacy?
Yes.
And are you aware of the metrics of performance for RxMe?
What specifically?
If I showed you a graph of the script count per month for RxMe, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Okay, at this time, I'd like my co-counsel to approach the witness entering in the graph.
Maybe for John.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Rose, what did my co-counsel hand you?
It's the number of prescriptions filled per month for the past few months.
And what does this graph show?
There has been a steady decline in the number of prescriptions filled.
And why would this graph be important to disseminate to the local pharmacies?
It would show how how they're adhering to the care of patients.
Does it say to me? It doesn't say anything about care of patients. What does the data actually show?
That from June to September, the number of prescriptions that have been filled is declined.
And would you agree that this sending them this graph was to motivate them to fill more prescriptions at a faster rate?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to call your attention to what you said in your deposition. You said, if I can quote, as an intern, there are certain level of errors expected to be made at every stage of employment. Did you say those words?
Yes.
After making her initial errors, did Mrs. Harris remain an employee of RxMe Pharmacy?
Yes, she did.
So is your testimony that Mrs. Harris's errors are in line with a certain level of errors expected by interns?
Not necessarily. Any errors that were made, they wouldn't necessarily constitute firing, but just a way to teach her to not to adhere better.
And did Mrs. Harris receive any disciplinary consequences as a result of her error?
Not that I'm aware of.
So to summarize, Mrs. Harris committed an expected error that ultimately resulted in Linda Goldblum's death. Is that correct?
Yes.
And she was not reprimanded in any way.
Not to my knowledge.
And the policies and procedures of RxMe have not been changed or modified since Mrs. Goldblum's death.
No, but we are working on ways to prevent these errors from happening.
Okay, well, this is over a year since Mrs. Goldblum died. So is it right to say that RX to me condones the type of errors that Mrs. Harris, the intern, made?
No, but it does take time for procedures to be written and implemented. They cannot be just thrown into place in two.
So, as a responsible corporate representative, is it not alarming to you that you expect for your interns' errors to kill your customers? No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Redirect.
Yes, sure. Ms. Rose, were you confident in Anna Harris's abilities to perform as an intern?
Yes, ma'am.
And why are errors expected from interns?
They're still learning. They're not necessarily experts in the field yet. That's what they're working to do. So any errors made would be a learning experience for them.
Are there any procedures put in place to account for the making errors?
Yes, any work that interns do should be monitored by a pharmacist or reviewed by a pharmacist.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor. I'll step down, but this may be able to step down.
All right. Ms. Rhodes, you may step down, be excused. You can call your next witness.
Your Honor, we call Steve Tiggert to the stand.
All right. Please come forward and take a seat at the witness stand.
May I proceed?
You may proceed.
Please introduce yourself to the court for me.
Hello, my name is Steve Tigret, and I'm the pharmacist at RX Mead Pharmacy.
And what brings you to court today?
Today, because we dispense methotrexate rather than metalazone.
And what is your educational background?
So I received my bachelor's in pharmaceutical sciences from the University of Mississippi, and I also received my PharmD from there as well.
Are you licensed to operate as a pharmacist?
Yes, I am.
And how long have you been a pharmacist?
I currently have been working at RX Mead for 7 years, and I previously worked in Jackson before that.
Specifically, what are your main responsibilities as a pharmacist?
My responsibilities include making sure prescriptions are filled correctly, communication between patients and the pharmacy, and ensure that counseling for new medications are available for all of our customers.
And can you tell me what happened on October 15th in regards to Mrs. Goldblum's prescription?
Yes, with regards to Mrs. Goldblum's prescription, I told, because she was not present in the pharmacy, Mr. Goldblum came to pick up her prescriptions, and I noticed that she was prescribed methotrexate, and I told Mr. Goldblum that he needs to pass information along to his wife that the medication needs to be taken once weekly.
And did you follow normal procedure?
Yes, I did.
Did you check the prescription after it was taken?
I did.
Can you tell me the difference between methotrexate and metalazone?
Yes, metalazone is a diuretic, and it was to get rid of the fluid backup in her lungs. And the methotrexate was indicated for her psoriasis.
Now, and can you tell me the consequences of mixing up the two medications?
Yes, when it comes to methotrexate, when taken once daily, can lead to a fatal death.
And when did you become aware of the mixed up of medications?
I became aware when I heard about the death of Mrs. Goldblum.
Now, is it standard for interns to take calls from patients?
Yes, it is.
And have you experienced any problems with this in the past?
I have not.
Can you tell me about the computer system used at RxToMe?
Yes, any drugs that come up as high alert, it won't let us dispense that medication. Whereas in this medication, it was supposed to be dispensed once weekly. And obviously that is why it didn't come up as high alert. So that is why it was able to go through.
Okay. Now, on October 15th, did you provide counseling to Mr. Goldblum?
Yes, I did. I told him that the prescription was to be given once weekly, and that I also told him to tell him to pass that information along to his wife, and if they had any further questions, that they can give me a phone call.
And what was Mr. Goldblum's response at the time?
He agreed to that. As he stated earlier, he said he even remembered that I did tell him that it was supposed to be taken once weekly, and he went on with his day.
Did he have any follow-up questions?
He did not.
And you said he was able to reach you afterwards for questions.
Yes.
Now, is it customary for pharmacists to counsel patients on side effects when they've previously been prescribed the medication?
When they previously have been prescribed, typically we don't need to reinforce that the side effects of the medication, because typically they know that, and even if they do happen to forget, they can give me a phone call and I can obviously let them know that information.
Can you tell me about the pharmacy's metrics for that quarter at the time of the incident?
Yes, we were down at the time.
And at any point, did you tell Ms. Harris to pick up the pace?
I did tell her to pick up the pace, but this was after the phone call. So obviously there was no distraction as she was on the phone. So I did tell her after that, because she does tend to lag behind at times. But you know, I said it in a positive way. Just encourage her just to pick it up just a little bit.
And are you aware of the pharmacy quality commitment manual?
Yes, I am.
And the manual recommends that only pharmacists take calls from patients. Why then was Ms. Harris allowed to answer Ms. Jennings' call?
Well, according to Mississippi Board of Pharmacy regulations, the pharmacy interns are allowed to take phone calls as long as I'm checking their work after.
And were you present when Ms. Harris took the phone call?
Yes, I was.
So in summary, you were following Mississippi regulation and allowing her to take the phone call?
Absolutely.
Nothing further, Your Honor. I tender my witness for.
All right, cross-examination of Mr. Tiger.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Mr. Tiger, what's your title again?
I am a pharmacist.
You're a supervisor, right?
Yes.
Specifically, you're a supervisor at RX to me.
Yes, I am.
And they trained you.
Yes, they did.
And you work there as an employee?
Yes.
Okay. So as a supervisor, it's your job, it's your responsibility, frankly, to do some extra work, isn't that right?
Yes.
Yeah, you're supposed to supervise the interns, correct?
Yes.
And to train them?
I am not instructed to train the interns. That's not my job, but usually they learn as they go, and they can, if they have any questions, they can ask me or the technicians.
So you don't train interns?
I do not.
RX to me doesn't train interns. They learn as they go.
Exactly.
Okay. On October 15th, you remember that day?
Yes, I do.
You were supposed to be supervising the pharmacy that day, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And supervision, that includes supervising phone calls, right?
Yes.
Reviewing prescription intake?
Yes.
Double checking prescriptions?
Yes.
Double checking prescription bottles to make sure the instructions are right?
Yes.
Okay. Checking the dosages?
Yes.
Okay. Matching the prescriptions and the indicators?
Yes.
Can you explain what an indicator is?
An indicator will show what the prescription is used for. In this case, it was used for her psoriasis.
So it's matching the diagnosis?
Yes.
Okay. You review patient history?
Yes.
And you prepare the warnings, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's run through what you did with Mrs. Goldblum. Do you remember Mrs. Goldblum?
Yes.
Okay. So when the call came in for Mrs. Goldblum, you weren't on the call, right?
I was not.
And you didn't call the nurse back to double check the prescription. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And you weren't able to double check the indicator either. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you didn't directly supervise in any way that prescription intake.
Well, according to Mississippi regulations, I am supposed to supervise phone calls, but nowhere does it say that I must be on the phone call listening to the exact conversation. I do, need to check the work after, but in this case, yes.
So let's be clear about this. You talked about Mississippi regulations before, right?
Yes.
So you're familiar with them, correct?
I am.
And they say that interns must be directly supervised when they do oral intake of a prescription. Isn't that right?
It does not say anywhere that I must be on the phone call with them.
But if you're not on the phone call, you are, by law, by that regulation, you must call back the hospital and double check. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
So you broke the law that day. Isn't that right?
Well, it was a busy day. And like I said, I don't with a lot of retail pharmacists, they do have to pick it up. And, in this case, I did not have the time to call back the nurse practitioner that did call in those prescriptions. But, I did my best that day. That's all I can say for that.
All right, Dr. Tiger, but to direct you back to my question, you broke that law that day, didn't you?
Yes.
A law that you were familiar with, right?
Yes, I was familiar with it.
Okay, so let's move on and talk about reviewing the prescription. What is methotrexate classified as in terms of danger?
It's classified as a high alert drug when taken daily.
So when you see methotrexate, does it alarm you in any way?
It does.
Okay, so you might pay special attention when that comes up, right?
Yes.
So when you paid special attention, you still decided not to call back the hospital?
Well, that's kind of why I emphasize the importance to Mr. Goldblum that he must pass it along to take it once weekly for his wife. And I told him that if he has questions, I'm here to answer.
All right, we'll talk about what you did with Mr. Goldblum in a little bit, but let's talk about what you did. You still, after seeing his high alert, decided not to call back the hospital, right?
I did not.
And you didn't double check the age on the prescription either.
I did not.
And Mrs. Goldblum, she's 60, right? She was 60 when she passed?
Yes, she was.
And that's very close to the age that has been shown as geriatric, right?
Yes.
That's a scientific name for someone who is older, right?
Yes.
And if someone's geriatric and they take methotrexate, they're actually at a higher risk. Isn't that correct?
Yes, they are.
So knowing this, knowing her age, because you do remember Miss Goldblum, right? They came in often?
I do.
Okay, so knowing her age, knowing this is a high alert drug, and knowing that the prescription was orally taken by an intern, you still decided not to call back. You still decided not to directly supervise the call. Isn't that right?
Yes, but typically I do talk to this family, and I was expecting them to call back if there were any questions, and I honestly placed my trust in them. And I think that I did my part as a pharmacist, and I followed our standard protocol and when dispensing this medication.
It's your standard protocol to break the law?
No, it is not.
Okay. Let's talk about that counseling you did. You gave him the pill bottle, right?
Yes.
If I showed you the pill bottle, would you recognize it?
Yes, I would.
May I retrieve your arm? You may. Approaching opposing witness. May I approach your arm?
Yes.
Approaching opposing witness, which is what has been previously marked as plaintiff's exhibit. I believe it's C. Now, when it comes to taking the pills, the methotrexate, what is the instructions on that pill bottle?
It says to take the tablet once by mouth every day.
So knowing that this is a high alert drug, knowing that Ms. Goldblum is close to the age of geriatric where she's even at more risk, you couldn't have even have crossed that out to rewrite it?
Yes, it honestly was just human error. The drugs sound very close alike. Entalazone and methotrexate both start with MET, and I just happened to miss that error. And also in our system, when it is given once weekly, it is not a high alert drug. So that's why it was tough to catch this.
Okay, well, you said something interesting there. You said you just happened to miss that error, but you didn't miss that error, did you?
I must have misread it.
Well, no, you saw that it was wrong because you told Mr. Goldblum it was wrong. Isn't that right?
I noticed that she does take this medication, and that's why I want to verify and let him know that his wife needs to only take this once weekly.
But to direct you back to my question,
yes,
you did see that it said take every day, and you instructed Mr. Goldblum that this was incorrect. Isn't that right?
I don't remember stating that. I do remember that I told him to take it once weekly. Okay. I must have misread this label at that time.
Okay. So you didn't read the label carefully?
Yes, it was a mistake.
Because you were in a rush?
Well, we did have to pick up the pace, but at the same time, we also have to be aware of any errors that could be possible. In this situation, I obviously misread the label, and that's just what happened that day.
And you misread the label because you were in a rush, right?
Well, I wasn't trying to speed up the process. It's just something that I have to do. It's part of my job. Every retail pharmacist, like I said, struggles with this today. And I did need to pick up the pace, but at the same time, I emphasize patient safety is first before speed.
So in emphasizing that, you called back to the hospital?
I did not.
You made sure that the prescription label was correct?
I did not.
Did you ask Mr. Goldblum any questions?
I did. I said if he had any questions that he can call me. And according to the Mississippi regulations, I did my part because it does say that if the patient is not available to pick up the medication, then I can tell them to pass along the word to, like in this situation, Mrs. Goldblum.
Well, let's be clear about a couple things with that. Did you ask him any questions?
Yes, I said if he had any questions about the medication that he can talk to me about it.
You asked him his wife's age?
I did not.
You asked him if she'd taken it before?
I did not.
You warned him that this is a high alert drug?
I believe I did. I can't remember because it was a busy day that day. Typically, I do tell my patients of any side effects that I notice, especially if they are fatal. Like I said, it was a busy day.
So it was a busy day, you were rushing, and your metrics were down, right? You hadn't sold as much, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So you were picking up the pace so you could sell more, right?
It's not because that we had, like I said, it was a tough day, and I was told by my boss that I do need to pick it up. That wasn't a choice by me. I did the best I can that day, and I was trying to keep up with the pace. And, you know, like I said, I'm human. That's just what happened.
So your decision to break the law, to not double check things, is because you wanted to make more money?
No, I was told by my boss, this is just to keep my job. This is not to make more money. I had to maintain a good steady pace.
So it was RX to me that told you to speed up?
I did need to pick it up, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Redirect?
Permission to retreat
Yes.
and attended back to the bench.
May I have a seat?
You may.
Can you tell me, is it in your job description to train interns?
No, it is not.
So specifically, you don't train interns,
I do not.
but are there other employees that do?
Yes, if they have any questions, the interns have any questions, the technicians, or even me, I can help.
So to clarify, RX to me does train their employees.
Yes,
And at the time, were you present when Ms. Harris took the phone call?
yes, I was.
And under Mississippi regulations, does it specifically say that you're to call the nurse back every single time?
No, it does not.
Under what circumstances are you required to?
Just in case if there may be a question that I have, and I notice something, but like I said, it does not say in Mississippi regulations that I must call the nurse back to double check that.
And were you confused at the time or had any questions?
Not really, no.
And when did you become aware that the label on the bottle was wrong?
Like I said, once I heard about the death, that's when I found out.
So you found out afterwards. So you did not tell Mr. Goldblum that the label was wrong during counseling.
Exactly.
And while you were in a rush, you still followed protocol and procedures. Is that
Yes.
right? Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. This witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you can step down, Mr. Lambert. The next witness,
The defense calls Joe Baskin to the stand.
Baskin. Ms. Baskin, would you come please get seated and stand?
Good morning, Dr. Baskin. Good morning. Please tell us about your please state your name for the court. Yes, my name is Dr. Joe Baskin. And please tell us about your education. Yes, I attended the University of California as an early entry pharmacy student. And I received my bachelor's of pharmaceutical sciences with a minor in chemistry from the University of California in 1994. And then I went on to graduate with my doctorate of pharmacy in 1998 at the University of the Pacific. And what work have you done since completing your degree? Since completing my degree, I have worked as a clinical staff pharmacist. I have specifically served as a medication safety clinical staff pharmacist, and I've also worked as a pharmacy technology consultant and a clinical professor.
And what is your current employment?
Currently, I serve as a pharmacy director at Sharp Healthcare in San Diego.
How long have you been in this position?
Since December of 2005.
Have you worked in a clinical setting?
Yes, I have.
Are you licensed as a pharmacist?
I am.
Do you specialize in the area of pharmaceutical care or pharmacy standard of care?
Yes, I do.
And how long has this been your area of expertise?
For about 22 years now.
What type of training, if any, have you received to prepare to work in this area of expertise?
So, like I mentioned before, I completed my doctorate of pharmacy, and I've also attended several seminars throughout my practice, particularly one regarding pharmacy medication errors. I also complete a certain amount of continued education hours to continue to maintain my knowledge and role as a pharmacist.
And have you worked specifically with pharmacy standards of practice and pharmacy malpractice?
Yes, I've done litigation support services, specifically involving cases regarding pharmacy standard of practice, pharmacy malpractice, and drug-related medical malpractice.
And how many cases have you had that involved pharmacy standards of care and pharmacy malpractice?
3 cases.
In those cases, did you render an opinion as to whether a pharmacist followed the standard of care?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, defense moves to formally certify Joe Baskin as an expert in the field of pharmacy.
Okay, field of pharmacy, would you like to blame like the board are the.
I would briefly, Your Honor.
You recognize.
Ms. Baskins, are you a certified pharmacist in Mississippi?
No, ma'am, I'm not.
Why would it be necessary for states to have their own respective certification if the state of your certification was irrelevant?
Repeat the question.
Why can you speak about pharmacy in Mississippi if you're only certified in California?
Well, I'm speaking on the national standard of care. So while I'm not speaking on the specific, like necessarily like state, I'm speaking on the national care of pharmacy and of pharmacists. And I have 22 years of practice, so I feel that I'm relevant to speak on this matter.
And one last question, do you have any peer-reviewed credentials to support your qualifications?
I have the litigation support services, but I have no necessarily peer-reviewed, like, no.
Okay, then Your Honor, I object to under the Dubar challenge, I object to the validity and admissibility of her expert testimony.
All right. The court is going to accept Ms. Baskin. I'm going to overrule your objection and allow Ms. Baskin to testify as an expert in the field of pharmacy. You may proceed.
Dr. Baskin, have you had the opportunity to review documents related to this case?
Yes, I have.
And what documents have you reviewed?
I reviewed the store metrics of the store, the State Board of Pharmacy regulations, the Pharmacy Quality Commitment Manual, Lexicomp, and the metolazone and methyl trexate package inserts. And additionally, I reviewed the profile of Linda Goldblum, the employee manual, or the, well, I mentioned that above, the PCQ manual, and then the CV of Steve Tigert.
And how did you choose what to review?
So I reviewed Lexicomp and metolazone and the methyl trexate package inserts in order to explain and differentiate between the two drugs for clarity. And then I also used the store metrics, the PQC manual, and the CV of Dr. Tigert to get a better understanding of the store, its expectations, and the background and history of the pharmacist. And then finally, I used the profile of Linda Goldblum to gather a better understanding of the case that we are discussing right now.
And what did you conclude after reviewing all of the relevant documents?
So based upon my review of the evidence presented to me, I can state with reasonable certainty that while Steve Tigert failed to adhere to proper intern training regarding appropriate phone-in prescription order protocol, he did not violate the standard of care of the pharmacist under the law.
Were you able to form an opinion as to whether or not Steve Tigert adhered to the standard of care?
Yes, I did.
And what information did you review to help you reach your opinion?
So I reviewed the PQC manual, and then I also use my clinical expertise to reach my opinion.
Did you employ any evidence-based methods in reviewing this information?
Yes, I did.
How did you apply those principles and methods to the facts of this case?
So I applied the documents that I reviewed to the national standard of care.
Are these methods reliable?
Absolutely.
Please explain that.
So these methods are reliable because they are based on the national standard of care of pharmacists.
Did you make any assumptions?
Yes, I did.
And what were they?
I assumed that the pharmacist followed the standard of care for his patient, which involved offering counseling when Mr. Goldblum came to pick up his wife's prescription. I also assumed that if the patient was not feeling well, she would have reached out to her physician, or the pharmacy would have stopped taking it since she had already previously been taking the medication in the past.
And why did you make those assumptions?
Your Honor, objection. This calls for speculation. She is putting herself in the position of the patient, Mrs. Goldblum, testifying to what Mrs. Goldblum would or would not have done.
Okay, your objection is noted, overruled. I think that she is taking assumptions of certain facts and will render opinion about the assumption of those facts.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed.
Why did you make those assumptions?
So I made these assumptions because as a pharmacist, we have our duty to our patients to follow the standard of care and should be willing to make ourselves available to offer assistance and guidance to our patients and his or her concerns regarding anything involving his or her medication and the therapy.
And lastly, how did that assumption assist you in arriving at your conclusion?
So my assumptions involving the patient helped me reach the conclusion that she neglected to reach out to the pharmacy or her prescribing physician when she began experiencing complications. Her husband also neglected his duty to communicate instructions to his wife regarding the medication. Since she had been on the medication before, she should have recognized that these things were out of the ordinary, and she had many resources she could have realized to determine the problem. If the pharmacy had been notified of her complications, they could have seen the methotrexate had been sold to her and could have reiterated counseling points that both she and her husband missed during initial counseling.
And you mentioned counseling. So what is pharmaceutical counseling?
So counseling a patient involves answering questions that the patient might have regarding a new or current medication while also offering additional services at the request of the patient.
Is it customary for pharmacists to counsel patients on side effects when they have previously been prescribed the medication?
It is reasonable for pharmacists to not counsel a patient if they have previously been on the medication. Also, patients tend to ask us questions as pharmacists if there is any uncertainty or lack of clarity in the directions of the medications.
And in your expert opinion, do pharmacists have to instruct patients of potential side effects of medication?
The pharmacist need only provide patient counseling. If patient counseling is not available, the pharmacist shall make known the fact that the patient counseling is available and that he or she may be reached. Generally, there is no duty to provide patients with potential side effects.
No further questions, Your Honor. I tender this witness for cross-examination.
All right, cross-examination of Dr. Ms. Baskin. Are you a doctor?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Baskin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Baskins, I'd like to ask you some general questions about the pharmaceutical industry, if I may.
Okay.
Would you agree that, as you stated in your deposition, that a pharmacist's main purpose is to provide a patient-centered care?
Yes.
And is it your expert opinion, in your expert opinion, is it common practice for a pharmacist to volunteer to work in a shift in a pharmacy?
To volunteer?
Correct. Would a pharmacist volunteer in a pharmacy?
Yes.
They would? Okay, they would show up without being paid? Okay, I'll move on. How do pharmacists bring in revenue? How do pharmacists do what?
I'm sorry, there was delay in the Zoom and I didn't hear you. Will you repeat the question?
How do pharmacies bring in revenue? How do they make money?
By selling medications.
And would you say that that's big business, medications?
Yes, I would.
And what do you think would happen if a pharmacist didn't meet specific corporate expectations? Do you think a pharmacist would get fired?
I don't necessarily think a pharmacist would get fired, but I think that there might be certain conversations that would need to be had if the store and the pharmacist in charge of the store were not meeting certain expectations of the corporation.
Okay.
I think maybe after a certain amount of times, the pharmacist could potentially be fired, but if the store was struggling, I don't necessarily think that a pharmacist would be fired on the spot.
Thank you, Dr. Baskin. Could you please tell the court what ISMP stands for?
Yes, ISMP stands for the Institute for Safe Medication Practices, and that organization evaluates current systems, identifies opportunities for improvement, and also tracks efforts made to improve medications.
Okay, and what would the ISMP classify as a high alert medication?
High alert medications are medications that are heightened risk of causing significant patient harm when used in error.
And are you aware that methotrexate is considered a high alert drug?
I am.
Are you aware of the dosing instructions which are printed on Mrs. Goldblum's prescription bottle?
Yes, I am aware of the dosing instructions.
And what medication was inside the bottle?
I believe the medication that was inside the bottle was methotrexate.
Okay, which is a high alert medication.
Correct.
And the defense, is the defense correct when they said that you reviewed the facts of this case in preparation for trial?
Yes, that is correct.
Did you review Mrs. Goldblum's autopsy report?
I did.
And according to her autopsy report, what was Mrs. Goldblum's cause of death?
It said that her autopsy report was due to daily usage of methotrexate.
Okay, and what were the instructions printed on the prescription bottle?
I believe the instructions said to take daily.
Methotrexate.
Correct.
Which was the cause of her death.
Correct.
And when there's an error with a prescription, who's responsible for it?
The pharmacy.
And who was the attending pharmacist RX to me?
Dr. Tigris.
And according to your findings, have any measures been taken to make changes to the policies and procedures at RX to me?
I believe not, but also I think that measures take a while and new regulations within the store take a while to implement if the policy is changing. So while I did not find any corrections made to the manual of the store, that doesn't mean that things are not taking place currently right now.
So it might take a while. Are you aware that Mrs. Goldblum died about a year ago?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
All right, redirect from the defense.
No, Your Honor.
All right, may this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Dr. Baskin, you may step down.
Thank you.
Defense rests his case, Your Honor.
Defense rests his case, all right. Any redirect witnesses?
No, Your Honor, but at this time, the plaintiff would like to raise a Rule 56 motion for summary judgment, directed verdict. Going off of the quotes by defense counsel's witnesses, Miss Anna Harris was liable. That was said by their first witness, Ms. Rose. She said that Ms. Harris was liable, and that via vicarious liability, and respondent superior would put prescription to me liable. Prescription to me does not train interns. I was rushed by prescription to me. Those were said by Mr. Tigrit. And then the pharmacy is responsible. That was by their expert witness in the last last cross-examination, Your Honor.
All right. All right, is that it?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, a response from the defendant on the plaintiff's motion for directed verdict.
Your Honor, Ms. Rose testified that there is training for every employee, and that although responsible, Anna Harris did indeed receive training and made expected errors, and some that were accounted for by baseline procedures that were put in place for this. Therefore, they accounted for this and did their best to make it.
All right. Any rebuttal?
Your Honor, just to clear up what happened in that exchange, and I wrote it down just to make sure. What was asked during cross-examination, or I believe it actually was during direct examination, was, excuse me, it was cross. It was cross. It was who is responsible for the mishaps that occurred. And she directly put it as Anna Harris was responsible. Anna Harris is liable for the mistakes that were made. Now, due to respondent superior and vicarious liability, that would mean RX to me would be responsible. Further than that, Your Honor, it was their own expert witness that just testified on cross-examination that when a mistake is made on a prescription, it is the pharmacy that is liable. That was the direct quote. The pharmacy is responsible, is the word that she used.
All right, thank you. And court has heard testimony and the arguments of the plaintiff's counsel and the response from the defendants. Your motion for directed verdict is denied.
Yes, Your Honor. Maybe have a brief recess before closing argument.
Yes.
2 minutes?
2 minutes be fine. Do y'all want to read the jury instruction before your closing arguments? Or I know that we have plenty of time. Okay. All right.
So what time should we be back? 10?
Yeah, we can take a 5-minute recess.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Well, court will be recessed. Oh, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I didn't think about that. I know, I didn't know your number, so I was like,
Oh, you got the count?
Yes. Love the time.
Oh, yeah. Steve.
Right.
Yeah, she's responsible. Yeah, so he's responding to yes, cool. Yeah. I just yeah. So it's called agent relations. I did.
Oh, yeah.
I would just be like, oh god.
Very calm, that's fine.
This just got dark. I was nice. But we're not talking about that. That's the only part I need. Other than that, it's fun to.
Yeah, I mean, we find.
Oh, you're gonna hear your line.
Yeah, so, the people.
It's a wink to the jury.
Right.
Are you gonna be the only one in the jury? Can we put someone else on the stand?
Yeah.
You're the jury, so I'm not just staring at that. I am, but like I want to be able to see my eyes. There's just one person. Look at it.
Okay, well, I see.
Well, I was gonna, like, I'm trying to, like, if you're there, and the camera's here, so I should be here, but then I have to sit all the way, so I can't sit here.
Yeah, so participants on Zoom ask the advocates.
I heard.
Yeah.
He was great.
You can even cross with instruction.
I'm seeing. Yeah, because then. Basically, like.
Last year, oh my god. And then they named our recipe the spirit of the law.
Did you guys watch that? Did Zach do, that the law require, justice, law requires justice demands. You can find whatever, yeah, that's his every.
And then the other guy, his name was Leftwell. Yeah, the other guy, what was his name?
Seth Davidson?
Yeah.
What a good He's our student council.
He was one side. Yeah. How many times did Zach take his glasses on and off during closing? That's a great question. Probably laughing. Oh my god. It was a little sassy. It was between the two of them.
Oh, last year.
I can't be sassy. Tiger, did you know you're the most important witness in this case?
You didn't apologize. I'm so proud. Yes.
Don't apologize.
We're so proud.
Yeah, you did great today. You did great today.
Thank you so much. You did really well.
Really?
Yeah. You did really
Thank you so much.
You didn't accuse her of stealing it. It was not okay.
Oh, yeah. She was like, say something, I was like, oh, no, Louis is coming in. It's like,
I'm the older up there, but that just sends us some jokes.
yeah. You guys ever actually entered this, right? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, yeah, she did.
I had to read it.
Oh, but you just entered it as,
Yeah, I did.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm like 100% sure.
I
No, I'm not sure you guys remember you. Like she had jumped.
All right, before we get back going,
Yeah,
Yeah, she did.
Alright, you can have a switch now.
okay, so before we get back going, because we're concluding much earlier than anticipated, we will be doing closing statements, and then Judge Charlton will be reading the jury instructions, and then you will be placed in your breakout rooms, and then you can step away from your computer for lunch for half an hour, so from 11:30 to noon, and then you need to come back to your computer, turn on your cameras, and you'll be doing jury deliberations. But please do not log out of Zoom or turn off anything, because you need to be placed into your breakout rooms. And if you leave, then it's hard for Sarah to get you back in. Yes.
Just to be clear, have they had the jury instruction already, or are they getting it out?
They are only getting it read to them.
Like, is it before or after my close up?
Oh, after.
Okay, that's good enough.
Yes. Okay. Good. All right.
There's a folder. You apply, you will try to get on it. We can do those ideas.
All right. I'm instructed that y'all will make closing arguments first, and then we will read jury instructions. So we'll go by the instructions that I received. All right, so, do you want to split your time?
Yes, Your Honor, I asked that I be able to reserve time for rebuttal.
Do you have a specific time, or what do y'all have, 20 minutes?
10.
We have 10 minutes total.
Okay.
And then.
5, or how do you want?
Whatever I had left, I'll ask to reserve that.
Okay.
That's all right. Thank you, Your Honor.
So you may proceed.
Please court.
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. Patient-centered care. That was talked about a couple times in today's trial, and it jumped out at me. Patient-centered care. When I thought about patient-centered care, I thought about Mr. Tiger. Mr. Tiger, I don't know if you realize, but he was the most important witness we had in today's trial. He was important because he was the supervisor on the day and over the prescription that eventually led to the death of Mrs. Goldblum. And he walked us through what happened in that day. And as I walk you through today's trial and the law of it, I want you to refer back to what he said. I want you to refer back to patient-centered care over and over. I wrote down a lot of what happened in today's trial because I think it's a little bit complicated, how this all fits in. So I'm gonna walk through you everything that happened today and everything that happened on the day of October 15th. So first we called up our expert, Dr. Fast. And when Dr. Fast was on the stand, I asked her what the MPPR was, because she had mentioned it a few times. And she instructed me that that's the law. It's the regulations for pharmacists. It's what they have to do under the law in their patient-centered care. She also talked about how she is an expert in pharmaceutical outcomes. Now, pharmaceutical outcomes, that means what happens, as she instructed, both behind the counter and in front of the counter. It's a communication. Now, she's a psychologist and she's an educator. She understands that when you tell someone something, they might not just get it right away, that you have to instruct them in a certain way. And this counts not only for what happens in front of the counter between Mr. Goldblum and Mr. Tiger, but what happened behind the counter with Miss Anna Harris. So when Miss Anna Harris got on stand, she talked about taking that oral prescription on the phone. She talked about how Mr. Tiger was not on the phone call with her. And Mr. Tiger told us that he did not call back to check the indicators or the diagnosis and to check the prescription itself, even though this was a high alert drug. Now, Mr. Goldblum got on stand and he cleared up a few other things. He said that, yes, I was counseled. But I'd like to talk about that word counsel, because counsel to me means that there's something thorough. He was told one thing, take this pill weekly. And it's interesting, because when I look back at the evidence, that doesn't make quite sense. If you look at the prescription bottle label, it says take one by mouth every day. Every day. If she was supposed to take it weekly for a couple of weeks, why are there 15 pills in here? She was supposed to take it every day, according to this prescription that wasn't checked by Mr. Tiger. So that's what happened on October 15th. And now let's talk about the law, because it's a little bit complicated. I was trying to think of the defense's defense before today's trial, and it's clear now they have two. They have standard of care, and they have who is liable. Now, standard of care, they brought on an expert who said the standard of care was fine. They did everything they needed to do. Mr. Tiger said that he broke the law. The law is the standard of care. It is the standard of care in a pharmacy. It is the standard of care on a street. It is the standard of care we follow every day. And they broke it. They broke the law. Now, in terms of who is liable, they tried to place the blame on Miss Anna Harris. And their expert did that. She said, and I wrote it down because it jumped out at me, Miss Anna Harris' mistake led to the mistakes that were made by the pharmacy. Now, you're going to see in your jury instruction an agency relationship. Now, it's called respondeat superior in law, and we wouldn't be lawyers if we didn't have fancy words for a very simple thing. When an employee, someone who works for a company, makes a mistake while they're in the process of that work, the company can be held responsible, and they are responsible. This happened again when Mr. Tiger got on stand, because he, again, is an employee and he made mistakes. He's the one who broke the law. RX to me is responsible. And then we really found out who was responsible. When Mr. Tiger said, they rushed me. Our metrics were down. And I can show you those metrics, and you'll have them back in the jury room. And when you review it, you'll see. They weren't selling a lot. They had their sales fall, so they rushed him. They said, you got to pump out pills. You got to push them. So he rushed, and he made his mistakes. It doesn't matter that Mr. Tiger was a good pharmacist before. It doesn't matter that he's a good pharmacist after, because Mrs. Goldblum is still dead from what he did on that day. And when he said that RX to me rushed him, he pointed the finger right at the defense. And he said, they're liable. So when you get the jury instruction, they're going to talk about a burden of proof, what we had to prove. And that burden is ours and ours alone. We're glad to have it. We believe we've met. The burden is preponderance of evidence. And again, lawyers speak for something very simple. It means more likely than not. So imagine our scales, right? We have weights on one side. We have methotrexate falling from the other. Now, the proof that we had to be more likely than not, the scales at the tip in our favor. Well, I believe they've toppled over. I believe they toppled over because what the defense brought, they said Nina Rhodes admitted guilt at one point when she said Anna Harris is responsible. There's another pill that drops when Mr. Tigert said, RX to me doesn't train interns, and RX to me rushed me. And then finally, when their expert got on stand and during cross-examination, she was asked very clearly by my co-counsel, Sarah Schneidman, when a mistake happens in a prescription and that crosses the counter and goes to the patient, who is responsible? Very clearly, she said, the pharmacy is responsible. These scales haven't just tipped, members of the jury, they have toppled over. And RX to me is liable for the death of Mrs. Goldblum. As soon as that prescription crossed that counter with that incorrect label, they became responsible. As soon as they wrote down the wrong prescription, as soon as it left, as soon as they didn't directly supervise all of that, they became liable, and they are still liable here today. We ask that you find them liable so that this doesn't happen again. I reserve the rest of my time for rebuttal, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Closing from the defendant.
Can I leave these up here for now?
Yes, sir. Defendant, do you need any exhibits on closing?
No.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today you heard a story about the tragic death of Mrs. Goldblum, which started with a call by Nurse Jennings and answered by Ms. Harris, who at the time was an intern and under the supervision of Dr. Tigert. When taking the prescription, Mrs. Harris did as she was taught and entered the first few letters into the computer system and drugs RX. Now, Dr. Tigert was available next to her at all times for questioning and checked the prescription afterwards and caught the enroll error. This prescription not only went through a pharmacist review before being dispensed, but was also entered into drugs RX. Now, unfortunately, the system did not catch this error because the dosage for methotrexate was appropriate for the duration period prescribed. Now, Mr. Goldblum was then counseled and instructed to tell Mrs. Goldblum to take once weekly, to which he replied that he would tell his wife. She took it as prescribed and sadly got sick and passed away several days later. Now, earlier today, we told you that you would hear from our witnesses. First of being the corporate representative, Nina Rhodes, of 10 years, who testified that RX2B employees received training, that they have systems in place to catch errors that were possibly made by pharmacists and interns, drugs RX, and that employees follow the PQC manual and state regulations. Next, you heard from Steve Tigert, the pharmacist of almost 7 years, who explained that the standard of care, state regulations, and the PQC manual was followed. He testified that RX2Me and their employees reviewed prescriptions and put them into drugs RX for further checking, as well as provided counseling to patients with new medications, including plaintiff Robert Goldblum. He also testified that even though the metrics were down for the quarter and the staff was rushed to fill prescriptions, that he nor Ms. Anna were rushed, and that he did not rush Ms. Harris until after she hung up the phone call from Ms. Jennings. Now, finally, we heard from our expert, Joe Baskin, whose one of many areas of expertise is in clinical pharmacy services and standard of care. She testified that the actions taken by Dr. Tigert and RX2Me met the standard of care, and also the policies put in place by RX2Me followed that standard. Now, Mr. Goldblum had one responsibility: to listen to his pharmacist. He left the pharmacy with verbal instructions to take once weekly. 3 simple words. Yet he failed to relay those 3 life-saving words to his wife. It was only after Mrs. Goldblum had been sick for several days that Mr. Goldblum decided to take her to the hospital. Now, the plaintiff attempted to show that the defendant acted negligently when handling Mrs. Goldblum's prescription. However, they failed to answer several important questions. Why did Mr. Goldblum pick up the prescription if he knew he was unable to remember 3 simple words? Why didn't he share these instructions with his wife? Why did he wait several days to take her to the hospital knowing she was sick? Silence is very telling. Now, Mr. Goldblum tells you that he doesn't know anything about his wife's health or the medications that she takes. He couldn't recall if he had relayed the medications to his wife, but testified that Dr. Tiger told him that the label on the bottle was wrong and to disregard it and to take once weekly. Now, you just heard from Dr. Tiger testify that he was not aware that the label was wrong until after the death of Mrs. Goldblum. Mr. Goldblum did not listen. He did not listen to his pharmacist. In sending her husband to pick up the prescription, Mrs. Goldblum understood that he would receive all of the information. It was known that she herself should have picked up the prescription, yet still sent her husband to do so. This meant that Mr. Goldblum only had the one responsibility, which was to listen to his pharmacist and relay those 3 simple words. The plaintiff was aware that he was responsible for communicating the dosage instructions to his wife, but failed to do so. Even though she had previously been prescribed the medication and correctly taken it, neither she nor the plaintiff thought to call the pharmacist for any follow-up questions. Now, the plaintiff's expert testified that interns at RSV would use the system to find medications, and also that they did not meet the standard of care. However, our witnesses showed otherwise. Now, the death of Mrs. Goldblum was indeed tragic and should have never happened. This is a death caused by failure to communicate on behalf of Mr. Goldblum and a failure to get to the hospital at the first sign of concern. By error, the label of Mrs. Goldblum medication had different instructions. However, the plaintiff was given verbal instructions during counseling by Dr. Tigret to take once weekly. Mr. Goldblum had the responsibility to listen to his pharmacist, yet created a whole nother scenario in his mind and did not remember 3 simple words. Now, today you have the duty of deciding who is liable for the tragic death of Mrs. Goldblum. The burden of proof in today's case is preponderance of the evidence. Yet the plaintiff has failed to meet this burden. So if there's any doubt in your mind, then the defendant should not be held liable. You should vote in favor of the defendant on all claims. Nothing further on.
All right, thank you. Claim for closing.
Now, I just want to clear up a few things that the defense counsel said. First of all, she misstated the law. If there is a doubt in your mind that the defense is liable, that's okay. Again, it's preponderance of evidence. It's more likely than not. Who is more likely than not to be liable? So just to clarify that. I struggled not to get angry during defense counsel's closing because of that blame part of their defense. Why did Mr. Goldblum feel it was okay to pick up his wife's prescription, if he couldn't remember 3 simple words? Now, calling my client unintelligent in open court upsets me. But let's talk about Mr. Goldblum. We met him today. He came up on stand. He's obviously an intelligent man. He's a banker. He told us that. He was doing something nice for his wife. She had just gotten home from the hospital. If you remember him saying that, she had just been discharged that day. That's why he went, because he's a good husband. And yet, there may have been a miscommunication at home. So that's why we have things like the prescription bottle label. That's why that's there. That's why this label is so important. And why Mr. Tigert saying that he could not take the time to just cross this out and write something else, or better yet, print a new one, is so horrendous. I have to say, I was angered when she blamed the deceased. She knew she couldn't take it every day. Blaming Mrs. Goldblum for her own death. It angered me. The facts of the case are this. RX to me did not follow the law. They rushed their pharmacist. He broke the law, and it caused the death of Mrs. Goldblum. Find them liable.
All right, Scott. All right, thank you. Court will now read the jury instructions for the jury to consider. You'll have a copy of these jury instructions, but you need to refer back to them. Anything further before I proceed from the counsel?
Nothing from me, Your Honor. I just ask that all the evidence be published.
And the exhibits will be made available to the jury as well.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, I think we have 4 exhibits.
Yeah, obviously. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, if the jury would please listen. Negligence. Robert Goldblum claims that RX to Me, Inc. was negligent. Negligent is doing something that a reasonably careful corporation would not do under similar circumstances, or failing to do something that a reasonably careful corporation would do under similar circumstances. 2, wrongful death. Wrongful death is a claim that occurs when a person dies as a result of a wrongdoer's actions or inactions, and the deceased person would have been able to sue the wrongdoer for damages. The deceased person's personal representative brings a wrongful death claim. 3, comparative negligence. RX to Me, Inc. claims that Robert Goldblum was also negligent and was more likely the cause of the injury to Linda Goldblum. You must determine what amount, if at all, Robert Goldblum was responsible for the injury to Linda Goldblum. 4, duty. To decide whether Robert Goldblum or RX to Me was negligent, you should consider whether a reasonable person or corporation would have done the same under similar circumstances. A pharmacist owes their patient the duty to act with the same attention, skill, ability, and caution of a minimally competent pharmacist who practices in the same specialty or general field of pharmacy in the United States. Pharmaceutical malpractice is when the pharmacist does not act with the same attention, skill, ability, and caution of a minimally competent pharmacist who practices in the same pharmaceutical specialty or general pharmaceutical field in the United States. This is also called pharmaceutical negligence. 5, breach. To determine whether Robert Goldblum or RX to Me, Inc. breached their duty, you must determine if they acted contrary to how a reasonable person or corporation would have acted in the same or similar circumstances. 6, cause. In order for RX to Me, Inc. to be legally responsible for Linda Goldblum's damages, RX to Me, Inc.'s negligence must have 1, actually caused Linda Goldblum's damages, and 2, a reasonable corporation would have anticipated that some damages to Linda Goldblum would occur as a result of RX to Me's negligence. RX to Me's negligence must have been a substantial factor in causing Robert Bloom's damages to be a legal cause. If Robert Goldblum would have suffered damages even if RX to Me had not been negligent, then RX to Me's negligence was not a substantial factor in causing Robert Goldblum's damages. 7, assumption of risk. The plaintiff may also be negligent if they assume the risk of damages when they know that damages could occur, and then they intentionally and voluntarily exposes themselves to such risk. 8, agency, agent and principal. An agent is a person who is authorized to act on behalf of another person or business. The other person or business is called a principal. The term agent includes an employee, and the term principal includes an employer. All right, 9, agency in general. A corporation is legally responsible for damages caused by its agent's wrongful conduct while acting within the scope of their employment. If you find that Robert Goldblum has proved that the following are more likely true than not true. 1, any employee of RX to Me was negligent. 2, Linda Goldblum suffered damages as a result of the agent's negligence. 3, the agent's negligence was a substantial factor in causing Robert Goldblum's damages. 4, the agent was RX to Me's employee. And 5, the agent was acting within the scope of their employment. When the agent harmed or injured Linda Goldblum, then RX to Me and the agent are both legally responsible to Linda Goldblum. All right, these are the instructions for the jury to consider. I guess they need to take a break, have lunch, and deliberate, and then render a verdict. We'll come back at what time?
We'll come back at
12:30. All right, court stands
And
recessed.
to be sure, Judge, do forgive me for interrupting, Judge, but just to be sure, you all would like students to go to their breakout rooms first before you break, is that correct?
Yes.
So if everybody could hang on for just a second, I'm going to open the breakout rooms. And then as the judge mentioned, I believe he said 12:30 to reconvene into your breakout rooms. Does that sound right to you, Ms. Potter?
You reconvene in your breakout room at 12 and you deliberate with your jury groups from 12 to 12:30 and you'll return to the main chat at 12:30.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to open the rooms now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in, Your Honor. Much appreciated.
Thanks for not trying to make a witness. Apologize.
Yeah.
During tryouts, he had the pharmacist apologize.
Thank you.
Sarah, you still there?
You're muted.
Sarah, can you hear us?
Yeah, okay. Yes.
Yeah, I just, you were off and then now I can hear you again.
Okay, sorry. The judge is going to provide some feedback right now, and then bring it to life.
Can we see the camera again? All the cameras
I'm gonna
off.
turn on Matt's camera. Matt, can you turn that camera on? Second.
Yeah, that's fine. Just see. Yeah.
Okay, real quick. I think you go to the plaintiffs. I like the theme, your speed, degree. I think it's good. Let me back up. I mean, y'all know a jury, you've got to remember, a jury is coming in here cold. Y'all know the facts.
Quiet.
I've been over them 100 times. And so you have to simplify. Anytime you're in, whether it's criminal, civil, any litigation, you got to simplify. And I like that theme, speed, degree. You know, it's a theme. And that's something that's catchy. You're trying to convince that jury that they should agree with your position, and that's something that's catchy. I like that. I think all of y'all did great. Y'all really did. I was very impressed. And I'm trying to think, the cross-examination did a good job. Both of y'all did a great job. I was impressed with that. You did great, everything. I mean, it's good. And but y'all make sure that you remember you're trying to simplify with that jury. They're not, they don't know the facts, y'all. So that's the theme I could go through. I like the idea about quality of care versus standard of care, bringing that out with Dr. Fats. Then let's see, Goldblum. The cross and the direct, all that was good. I'm trying to put the cross, subsequent reveal. I think the one thing on both of y'all, allow the witness to tell their story. And with Goldblum and with Tiger, I guess, they tell their story. That's always important. It's not about you. You don't want the attention directed on you when you're asking. You want it to be a witness so the jury can hear their conversation. That's always important. Let them tell their story. This is about telling the story of Mr. Goldblum, and then on y'all's side, you may want to go after him. You went after Mr. Goldblum and said, it's your fault. Mr. Goldblum, why did you not tell your wife about, that and your experts. So I think those are the main things. There was some other stuff, but y'all really did well. I was very impressed. I mean, I think y'all hit the ground running. I don't know if y'all want to get in litigation. When I got out of law school 30 years ago, there was more litigation. There's less of it now. But I think y'all, once you take the bar, one more year in school, your third year, you take the bar, you'll be ready to go. The unfortunate thing, before you get to the courtroom, you're gonna have to deal with all the discovery process. So don't let that get you down. But anyway, y'all did fantastic. Just keep up the good work. This is a good opportunity for y'all to get out there and get on your feet and be like in a real world situation. And like I said, I think y'all can jump into it. Y'all can go up to Fayette County with the help of somebody, try a lawsuit, be ready to go. So congratulations to all of y'all.
And thank you for everything.
Yeah,
Sure.
thank you so much for being here.
I mean, they're gonna be in their deliberations at 12, and then just go back to the
Judge, I've got a quick question for you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Have you had any real life cases yet where you've had some element of the case on Zoom or remotely like we did here?
We've had a hearing, a motion hearing, but no trials, and I think that would present a lot of complications. The Supreme Court has allowed in criminal pleas, they've allowed the defendant to appear via Zoom. I haven't done that. We're taking pleas. I'm gonna go back this afternoon and take a guilty plea. But I have been involved in a civil motion where you had four or five lawyers. And, it was okay, but it certainly is not the best way to present a case. But under the circumstances, that's just how we had to do it. But that's the only thing is motions. Now, other states I've been listening, I think they have tried it to actually taking witnesses via Zoom. And I just don't know how well it worked. But, I mean, that's an option.
Thank you for being here and for participating. We definitely couldn't have a trial without a judge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I appreciate y'all's hard work.
Okay, Sarah, go ahead and join the line to review key matches.
All right, can everyone on Zoom hear me? Okay, perfect. As a reminder, please turn off your cameras and mics and make sure that you are still on a hide all non-video participants view. While Lynette is finishing up with the verdicts, we're going to go ahead and have the question and answer period right now. So if you have a question for any of the participants, either as witnesses or as attorneys, that you would like answered, please go ahead and drop it in the chat. We're going to keep it to at most probably 15 questions. So if you have a question, go ahead and drop it in the chat, and then we'll have our participants answer for you.
Good start.
All right, so that's a good question. So Lynette, kind of get it started. What were the themes of both teams? So Matt, do you want to go ahead and explain what a theme is, and then just kind of explain what you guys decided to do, and we'll flip over to you guys.
Yeah. So I don't know if y'all got to see the judge who was on, but he explained this a little bit. So juries, the average jury reads at 5th grade reading level, and so you have to explain things in the simplest terms that you can. So a theme is a catchphrase really that kind of helps them remember what's happening in the case, helps them remember the facts that you think are important. So ours were speed of greed or speeding greed. And I think my co-counsel actually did a much better job than I did of hammering that speed and greed. And it came up in questions every once in a while. I know, so that's what you really want. You want your witnesses to bring it out. I know our expert witness said, I was like, why was he rushing? And she was like, it was speed of greed. He was trying to make more money. And then when I questioned Tiger and it came out again, why were you rushing? Because RX to me told me to. So speed of greed was our theme, and it's just something to help the jury like remember what's going on and why things are happening.
So our theme was based on take once weekly. And I think the strongest part of our case was that Mr. Goldblum didn't follow the instructions of the pharmacist. And so we kind of tried to base that on our defense, and we basically also wrapped around like listen to your pharmacist. So in some of our questioning on like direct and cross, we tried to like reiterate like, you know, did you listen to your pharmacist? Did you tell the instructions to your wife? So yeah, again, like our thing was take once weekly.
We're waiting for some additional questions. I guess another good one. One of the most important parts of trial strategy is the order that you call your witnesses in. So I'd like to kind of go through that process for you guys, and what was the idea behind who you called first during your case in chief?
For us, it really wasn't a strategy. We knew that we wanted the expert to go first. That way she could kind of give a background on what should be happening. And then so that's in the minds, the first thing on the mind of the jury. And then throughout the trial, they're going to see that it didn't happen quite that way. So that was the only little bit of strategy that we had. But honestly, we wanted to break each other up with alternating stuff like that. I think Sarah has a little bit more to comment on that.
That's what I was gonna say, that we wanted to break each other up, and you went and I went, and I knew I was gonna direct Goldblum. And so we wanted to basically break up our directs, and as Matt said, have the expert as our first, and then bring in the widow second.
Sarah, you were a little garbled there, but I think what I was hearing from you is that it was strategic because you wanted to. It was a strategic decision based on the kind of information you wanted to pull out and when you wanted the jury to hear that. Was that about right?
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
No, it's about the same. All right. Defense, did you guys have any strategy to when you called your witnesses?
So we chose Nina first to kind of show like the policies and rules that they were supposed to be following. And then we did Steve to show how they implemented that they actually were following it, and then the expert to him, the artist, to show that they followed the standard of care and that everything was up to standard of what they were doing.
Good stuff. All right, Lynette put, can the pharmacy students who portrayed a witness give quick debrief as to something they learned as far as realizing law is important in their field? So I guess we'll just kind of go in call order. So I think the first one was Billy Fast. What did you learn? I guess any of the witnesses, if you can jump out and say something you realized was important.
It's Dr. Fast. You.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
The question is just, is there anything that you learned kind of about law from your experience being a witness in this trial and prepping with the attorneys?
Yes, a lot actually. So I wasn't even really sure what the procedures were at the time. Like, I didn't know what a direct and a cross was, or a PCQ or PCC packet, and I didn't know that the information had to directly come from that. So anyway, just simple things like that would really help us later on in life if we ever found ourselves in this circumstance. Just, I mean, honestly, the terminology and the rules, you know, like those are things that we're just not aware of from the side. So yeah, I learned a lot about the procedures.
I was gonna say that during, I guess, prepping for all of it, it's really important to kind of think about questions that like the opposing party is going to ask you, because if you just focus on what you're gonna say, then you're just kind of like stuck in a spot where you can't really get out of. Because I think that's one thing I messed up on, because I didn't really think about what the opposing counsel was gonna ask, and then I got tripped up, and then it was like after we had time to kind of prep and everything, I was able to, start thinking about, okay, well, this is something that they could ask about, and just like recognizing little details was really important. And they did a great job at recognizing details and pointing things out in my expert witness report, and just little things throughout like the deposition that were really important to kind of like hone in on. So, and also like Hayden said, just a lot of the terminology, like you see stuff or hear stuff, but actually being able to like be in here and be a part of the side and hear terminology like in a specific setting like this, is really cool. So.
Yeah, I just want to say I thought our witnesses all did a really good job, especially after time went on. They got more and more prepared, and they started doing something that was really impressed me. Especially like our expert was great. She started explaining kind of tough topics in a really simple way, and I thought that was really impressive. So I just want to kind of commend them on that.
All right. Any other comments from witnesses?
Yeah, is my sound better now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Yeah, my comment would be on our witness. Something that kind of threw me off was and I can't see if Ryan is in there. He might be in the back. But so when I questioned him about the counsel he received, nowhere the first time that I heard that the pharmacist had he said that he heard the pharmacist say that the instructions on the bottle were not correct. And eventually in the trial, we corrected that. But I was trying my best to kind of correct that, and I that was a challenging moment, because I didn't want that to be part of the case.
All right. Are there any further questions, comments? All right, then we'll get to the main event. Madam Foreperson, have you reached a verdict?
Yes.
All right, please all rise for the reading of the verdict. In the matter of Robert Goldblum versus RX2Me Incorporated, how do you, the amalgamation of the juries, find?
As a culmination of all 15 jury groups, the jury finds RX2Me liable for the claim of negligence in the wrongful death of Linda Goldblum.
All right, thank you very much. Go ahead and start cutting that check. Thank you very much. You guys may be seated. We are now, Ms. Potter and Ms. White are going to announce awards for the competition.
So we have 3 awards that are stemming from the competition that took place this semester. So not only do the advocates get to actually do the trial, but they also make the complaint, they make the answer to the complaint, and pharmacy students draft expert reports. So this is a little bit more realistic than other mock trials that we do here because we don't usually have that. So for best complaint, they're not here today, but Emily Morgan and Maggie Ogletree won best complaint. And best answer went to Kaylin Sly and Harley David. So congratulations.
All right. I'm gonna take my mask off so you can hear me. Sorry guys if this is a problem. So as everybody, we had 4 individuals who made the expert witness reports, and this person really was like, look, I can do this, I'll do it. Just tell me what I need to do, just whatever. So everybody please give a big round of applause to Anna Miller for best expert.
Yeah. Sorry. We do have one and we'll get to you. And so now we're going to move on to best of law. Best of law is essentially going to go to the best advocate that the judge had input in, and then the e-board as well as our advisors had some input in as well. And this year's best of law goes to Matthew Bellinger.
Ready? Okay. All right. And then there is the best of pharmacy. This pretty much goes to who everybody thought had the best presentation, was I guess most knowledgeable about everything. This person stepped up a lot, did a lot over the summer. So best of pharmacy goes to Hayden Lovelace. Alright, ready? 1, 2, 3. Or take one more. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Alright, take it all the way off. Alright, ready? 1, 2, 3.
And so we are going to have a trophy that has little plaques on it for the competition in total. So all of the names will be added to a bigger trophy that will be held somewhere. We haven't decided yet. But so congratulations, Matt and Sarah, on a great trial. And then congratulations to all finalists. You guys did fantastic. And thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you to those who Zoomed in. We're really excited. Zach, if you want to let them know about membership in the IPE board.
Absolutely.
I think that will wrap us up for today. So thank you, everybody.
All right, before I get started on membership opportunities, I want everyone to give a big round of applause to Lynette and Casey. They have been absolute rock stars with this entire process. And thank you guys for just a great competition. It's always a really cool experience. I did this last year. It was a blast. I'm glad to see that it's kind of grown, had really cool new elements added, and I can't wait to see where we take it to next year. So for those of you who don't know and are watching on Zoom, my name is Zach Brand. I'm the law chair of the IPE board. We do most of our membership stuff in the spring. So in about February or March, we'll really start asking people in earnest. But we've already sent out some information to people to become interested in the board. If you're watching this and did not specifically request information on that 1L sign up sheet thing that went around, please send me personally an email, and I would be happy to get you guys set up. The email address is zmbrand@go.olemiss.edu. We are more than happy to listen to reach out to you guys, keep you in the loop, and if being part of this trial is a big undertaking, but we love to have everybody as part of it. So if you are a P1 who's interested, highly recommend, and we'll get you involved in this, and then it'll be a great time. So thank you all again so much for watching via Zoom. Thank you all so much for attending. And I think that's everything that we have.
Yep.
You guys are good to go.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's over.